Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 88 of Through the Years, the podcast that reviews Ring of Honor show by show from the beginning. I'm Trevor Dame, joined as always by the co-host, Matt Feuerstein. Matt, it's been 3 crazy weeks in the world of wrestling and in our world in a weird way. Couple of things to talk about. I was debating if I should talk about one of them, but the first thing I think we should talk about is anyone that's followed us on Twitter would know, like, we've talked about, and we'll give the Twitter out at the end of the show like we always do, but like, we've both talked about this in the last week or so, but it's crazy how many weird callbacks to whatever we're covering at like that particular moment on Through the Years are now happening in wrestling. And this one is the craziest. I think it blew both of our minds, where we are right now in the Through the Years timeline, where we're going show by show. So we're not picking and choosing. We're just going in order. And we started this over 5 years ago now. We just happen to have fallen on the timeline where right now we are covering a period where Samoa Joe was on a quest to win his 3rd different Ring of Honor title, the Triple Crown, so to speak. And starts a feud with his protege, Jay Lethal. It is now 17 years later. Samoa Joe just won his 3rd unique Ring of Honor title. It was not the tag title that he was searching for in 2005, but it's the TV title. And he is starting a feud with Jay Lethal. And that is fucking bizarre. I can't get over how weird that is.
Well, it's not just that he's starting a feud with Jay Lethal. It's that it's like a main event level feud on a major primetime TV wrestling company that is drawing a lot of attention. And it just came out of completely nowhere. Like there was nothing in the world 6 weeks ago that would suggest that this could possibly be a thing that was on television, right? And now It was the main event of the most recent Dynamite that we just saw. The final angle of the show was an angle involving Samoa Joe and his new television arch nemesis, Jay Lethal, on AEW Dynamite. And that's freaking weird.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, obviously Samoa Joe and AEW isn't a surprise. Like the day he got released, people I'm sure were speculating about that. But if someone had told you that day, Samoa Joe's first feud in AEW will be against Jay Lethal, and he'll be winning on his first AEW match a Ring of Honor title. Because, by the way, AEW owns Ring of Honor now. You'd go, what? Like, it is amazing at this point that AEW keeps finding ways to feel like you playing like Total Extreme Warfare or something. It is wild.
It is. And like a lot of it's really cool. Some of it maybe not always, but like it's certainly bizarre. Like it's just that. And then, I mean, the funny part is, like we were just talking about this, there is another match on this show that we're reviewing that was also featured on AEW Dynamite in the past 6 months. Like an exact match.
It's just so weird. But I mean, obviously Tony Khan was a big Ring of Honor fan, so I'm sure like he's living in his Ring of Honor nostalgia as much as anybody. Because you hear like Dave Meltzer and stuff, like wonder like why even buy the Ring. I mean, he's not against them buying the tape library, but like you're promoting Ring of Honor shows when just expanding AEW to another brand and using the AEW name would draw more and blah blah blah. But I think sometimes people, when they just think about them, just forget that like. I think Tony Khan's just a big wrestling nerd, and I think sometimes he's going to do things because he's a fucking wrestling nerd, because the idea of owning Ring of Honor and keeping it going, or having Samoa Joe debut in Ring of Honor again after all these years, like, it tickles the nerd boner. I wish I could take that back.
I mean, I can edit it out if you want.
No, it's okay. Leave it in. I live with my mistakes.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Corino is currently employed by WWE, right? So, but I was going to say, if Tony Khan really wanted to troll us, he could somehow book something involving Steve Corino and Homicide in the next 5 months, and I think that would just put us over the top.
He could book Colby Corino in Homicide.
Sure, I mean, he could do that. I mean, listen, I'm not. No, I don't read anything into my tone. I have no feelings negatively about that.
Yeah,
but it would not be the same. It would not be quite the same thing.
No, but you could do the old false advertising, like when WWF in the 1980s was expanding into everyone's territory, and they went into Memphis. I always loved this story where they wanted to get Jerry Lawler at that time, but couldn't, and so Instead, they promoted like Hulk Hogan versus the King, and that's all they promoted. It was Hulk Hogan versus the King Harley Race. Like you could do next week on Dynamite, Corino versus Homicide. You could technically be telling the truth.
But you know what's it's funny that we're entered into a world where like promoting that match on a national television would get a lot of buzz because like there was once upon a time where that was just an indie feud, and now like if you said Carino versus Homicide on Dynamite next week, like Twitter would go crazy. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, people know that Steve Carino is signed to WWE, so maybe not. So they'd probably figure it out. You know what's funny about all this like AEW ROH nostalgia? Remember when Bryan Danielson first joined AEW and everyone was like, "Oh, I wish he could have gotten the Final Countdown as his music." Well, now after the whole CM Punk music at Revolution kerfuffle, I realize it might be for the best because for some reason, like people would get mad if he came out to the Final Countdown. Like, what is this music? Why would anyone care? Like, it's just really, man, the world is a weird place, huh?
Well, revisiting this now, even like the Ring of Honor people are coming out where Danielson started using Final Countdown. You can hear on the first couple like shows he used it, like a couple people remembering like this song sucks or stuff like that. Like even I think some fans the first time Danielson ever used it were like they just I think they didn't kind of get how it's it can be it's kind of a corny ass song, but it's kind of corny in an awesome way.
Well, I mentioned this on the show where we covered that match, Glory by Honor. There were definitely people in the crowd because I was there that understood the irony of it immediately and were psyched about it. Like they were like, "Oh yes, the freaking Final Countdown! This is awesome!" Like like just like this is a hilarious song because there's no one who was like around then who watched Arrested Development that didn't understand that song was funny. You know what I mean? And I do think, I think there was some crossover between Arrested Development fans and ROH fans. I mean, me for one.
You're absolutely right. So I was just thinking about this show will probably be like the show review part of this episode will probably be a little bit shorter, or who knows? Because usually when there's one long match on a show, I find our episodes are a little bit shorter because we're just talking about fewer segments.
There's fewer matches, yeah.
Yeah. It's not like we occasionally it's been like this, but it's usually not like, oh, it's a 60-minute match. So we will now talk about it like 4 times as long, but sometimes we talk about longer matches a little longer. But anyway, I thought I could talk about this, but there actually is, because it's kind of a goofy thing, but I thought I might as well address it because it is kind of related to the show and Ring of Honor. And
it is not related to the show, but it is related to one of the hosts. I have nothing to do with. I have nothing to do with this, and I want to make that completely clear.
Yeah, let's make that clear. So, but I just kind of want to say it just because it's a weird thing, and also there is something at the end that kind of ties into the not anything to do with Matt, but with how I approach the show that I just kind of want to make clear. It's not. This is
Trevor Dame's show, so he gets to talk about Trevor Dame's stuff. That's how I see it.
So, during I'm on Twitter. During WrestleMania, I did the usual thing I do, which is I do dumb tweets. And I wrote a tweet that I thought in the moment was innocuous, but I can quickly realize why it would not be seen that way. I can just read. I wrote, all those years ago, CM Punk mocked Kevin Owens on the Indies, made fun of him for wearing a t-shirt. 17 years later, Kev is getting Punk's unrealized dreams, main eventing WrestleMania, a match with Steve Austin, and he's doing it in his t-shirt. Now, I honestly swear to God, when I first wrote that, meant that far more in the spirit of, isn't this crazy how far Kevin Owens has come, and how remember how, that was like the big negative on Kevin Owens was the t-shirt, not just from Punk or Gabe or anybody, but I remember, in fact, I might have even had private conversations with you back in the day, Matt, where I even said I don't think Kevin Owens will ever obviously Kevin Steen then will ever get signed by WWE, even as a fan of him, as long as he's at the weight he's in wearing a t-shirt, because they have, WWE has such body issues. And I was completely wrong about that, but in fact, I think I also had a conversation where I was I don't think with you once where I was I don't think Bryan Danielson will ever make it in WWE. And you were more, I think you were more open to the idea that he could, and you were definitely the right one on that. Cause again, I just thought that they would not be WWE's biases would be so strong that they would, not be able to surmount them. Anyway, sidetrack. So this tweet very quickly blew up, and a lot of people liked it. A lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people got angry at me, and I think very quickly what I realized is, one, reading it back like an hour or two later after all the cons, I quickly realized, yeah, this comes off like more pointed than it, and that's on me. That's on the wording I did. And the second thing was a lesson I think I learned from this, and I should have learned earlier, is like you shouldn't you should be cognizant of, if you tweet something, it can be carried to a lot of people that don't know you and kind of don't know your general range of opinions and stuff. Because I noticed a lot of the people that were defending me were people that like have followed me for years and were like kind of know how I feel, or listeners of the show. And the people that were mad were people I've never seen in my life. And I was like, that probably again speaks to me. If I make a tweet that only people that know me kind of understand the character of, that's on me. So anyway, CM Punk saw this tweet because a ton of people were tagging him and harassing him about it, which made me feel bad. And Punk wrote, "Insane after all these years, people still can watch that video, listen to Kev tell that story about Gabe making him wrestle in a shirt, and blame me for Kev coming back into the locker room and yelling at me. I'm super happy for him right now, but that doesn't fit your narrative." It's funny, like a lot of people got mad at me, and especially after that tweet. I think the funny thing is, like, I am perfectly fine with that. Like, that's people getting mad at me on the internet does not bother me, and I can understand people have a right to their opinion. I think that was more funny is I had a lot of people reach out to me privately that are like, "Trevor, are you okay? Like, I had a death in the family or something. Like, how are you holding up?" Like in DMs and stuff. And I was like, he made a comment. Like, it wasn't even that. I think, Matt, you and I talked, like, it's not even that bad of a comment, quite frankly. I get worse comments on a monthly basis.
To my credit, I didn't check if you were okay. I just mostly made fun of you, so.
Yes. I believe you said something about, like, if you have to choose between Punk and me, if it comes to that, you will choose Punk over me.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Let's be real.
I mean, let's face it, he's going to be co-hosting the show next episode, so he'll have a lot to say about Final Battle 2005. So...
That man is too good for me.
So
I'm not going to ask him to marry me as much as I'd like to.
So anyway, so I will again stand by, like, I maybe should have never made the tweet at all, or at the very least could have done a lot better to been aware of what would have happened if it got spread to a bunch of people that, I was still thinking like I had 100 followers. I have, 9,000 followers, which isn't that many in the grand scheme of things. It's not enough to get me, like, I'm not going to get sent free boxes of cereal to review them, Matt. But that's the real mark of if you're an influencer or not. But it's enough that if I say something stupid and the right couple people retweet it, it can spread pretty far. And I should have been more cognizant of that. But the other thing I will say is I also kind of felt bad just in general, after that Punk tweet about, like, the content of the tweet, how people were interpreting it and thinking, like, man, more than just not the way I put it, but even just like, should I even be dredging up something like that? Even though I just meant it as kind of an amazing story. And then people reached out to me, people in wrestling, people I cannot say who they are, but Matt, the big one. And I will just say, I stand by the content of the tweet. I felt a lot better after talking to some people. And
I can't believe Hulk Hogan wrote you to tell you how much he was on your side.
Vince McMahon was like, Trevor, And also, I will just say, for anyone that's going to try and do detective work, I hate being the person that's like, oh, here's something and I can't tell you about. I never do that, almost because I never have anything to tell anyone about. I will just say, if you're going to sleuth by looking through who follows me on Twitter, it's no one who follows me on Twitter that reached out to me. But
okay, so it's not Hulk Hogan then, because he's one of your biggest fans.
Oh my god! But anyway, where it relates to the podcast, again, this is all just such a goofy, funny, weird thing, and it's no big deal. And is the first couple times I tweet about like Punk on like Dynamite or something after that, a few people, like mostly people that know me, where they were just good-naturedly joking, were like, if I said something slightly positive about something Punk was doing, it was like, oh, you're just trying to suck up to him now, and they were joking, or oh, you're getting back if it was something negative. And that is something I didn't respond to anyone in a bad way, but I was in my own head like kind of like about that, because I will say something I do take semi-seriously is I think we on the show do a good job of kind of separating work from people. And quite frankly, again, I'm not even like going to have any ill feelings towards CM Punk, but like, I don't cotton to the idea, even as a joke, that although people can joke about it, but like, I just want to say on this show, I think we do a good job, again, of not, there are people that are related in wrestling that have said nice things to me or nice things about the show. Gabe Zapolsky, we've talked about, who, big part of Ring of Honor, and, people that in my days who have, as a dumb blowhard, who have said not nice things to me or don't like me. And I think if you listen to the show and listen to our opinions, you wouldn't be able to tell, because I don't really like, the show is just about our opinions about the wrestling, and the show is only as valuable as our opinions are honest. And I just want to say, like, I'm never going to change my opinion about CM Punk or anybody based on if they like or dislike me in any way or have any minor positive or negative online interaction with me. And I just want to kind of assure listeners of that. Like, I still think CM Punk is one of the greats and one of my favorite wrestlers of the last 20, 30 years. I mean, I am a Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame voter as of last year, and I was invited to that Voices of Wrestling podcast, and I said I was very close to voting Punk in. If he had another good year in AEW, I would probably vote for him next year. And guess what? He's having another good year in AEW, and I will probably vote for him in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame next year. So, like, nothing, in my opinion, about any of this is more or less negative. And, like, I'm going too long. I'll just say, like, there are wrestlers that, like, whose political beliefs, who have Twitter lives, who have bad stories about them, like, far worse than anything that CM Punk has been accused of, that I can still be that I've still been very positive about on the show, because they're great wrestlers. And likewise, I think anyone that's listened to this show and listened to us talk about, like, the booking or announcing of Gabe Sapolsky will know, I think, could probably agree that even though he's been nice to us, like, I think we've been very honest and even-handed about both the good and the bad. And obviously there's more good than bad, because if Matt and I didn't think there was more good than bad, I don't think we'd be devoting so many hours of our lives to doing a podcast about Ring of Honor. This is just for fun. So, but that was my big last takeaway, was just like, nothing about this podcast is ever going to change. So don't worry about that. Don't fret. Don't overanalyze things. It's fine.
I'm sure people were really worried about it. No, but
you'd be surprised. There were people reaching out to me. It was, people took it more seriously than I just took it now, and I just took it too seriously.
Yeah, people. Don't worry about our podcast. No, you shouldn't care about it. It's not important. No, just kidding. But no, I mean, you have to admit, Trevor, even though it's good that you're not going to, like, change your thoughts on different wrestlers because of personal issues that you have to admit, it would be kind of fun if this podcast became all about you settling personal scores. I think people would really enjoy that, I think. And I would just sit here and be like, okay, I'm scared. Which is kind of what I do anyway, let's be honest.
I think there's enough wrestling podcasts that are nothing but that. I think we stand out by being, it's almost like nowadays you're more of a rebel if you don't get a tattoo. Like, we're like the podcast that doesn't have any tattoos or piercings.
Fair.
That's our new slogan, by the way. We have scars. We're scarred babies.
Yes, our baby. We've been scarred ever since babyhood. Is that a word?
That's my favorite spin-off to the show Parenthood, is Babyhood. That's a good one. Instead of calling it Parenthood Babies.
Yeah, so I guess I should say something about all this, which is I like CM Punk. I like Trevor.
Can't we all get along?
Yeah, I mean, if they have a match, I'll sit ringside. I'm gonna be an impartial enforcer on the outside. And I'll run in and make the 3 count after the referee gets knocked out.
Like, this just brought us closer together, because, like, Punk and I have another thing in common now, which is we both get irritated by Trevor Dame. So, like, it has just brought us closer together at this point. So, anyway, that long, weird thing to say. Time for the usual plug. And I realized the other day, Matt, the weird thing about the plug is the only thing we plug is feeds of the show. And I realized why some people who are long-time listeners or not long-time listeners might go, if I'm listening to the show, why do I need a plug for how to listen to the show?
You don't say.
Matt, I know you probably, but I will say this. One, it started as not really a plug for the show, it was a plug for the Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network, which we were required to do, and I was glad to do. It's only fair that we offer that instead. And now that we have like 3 ways to listen, I always want to make sure like people have found one way, know that they have options, because there are some, like if you are a listener and you are listening to the years feed, which is just us, just looking on any podcast app and it's through the years, and it's just us, you might go, okay, I like the show, but it's kind of a feed where I get one show like every 2 to 4 weeks and nothing else. Like I want something that gets updated more. Well, if you go to the Pro Wrestling Only Podcast Network feed, it'll be our show and a bunch of other shows. So you'll have like a regular drip of good wrestling content. And if you're on that feed, go, well, I just like Trevor and Matt's show, and it's really hard to find all the archives because there's a feed with a billion episodes of different podcasts in there. Well, then there's a feed that is just us. And if you like seeing one still image for 3 hours and listening to your podcast on a browser, I mean, we're on YouTube. So I just, as always, like to let everyone know all of that. Matt, finally, we can get to the show. We're getting the second last show of 2005. We are almost through. Steel Cage Warfare took place December 3rd, 2005 at Basketball City.
Now, finally, something that I get to talk about for a while.
I was really about to say, this is your time to shine.
Yes.
This is your CM Punk in New York City in front of a report crowd of 850 fans. Matt, before I hand it to you, a couple quick notes about the show overall. In the Observer, Dave wrote, Ring of Honor debuted a new location in New York, the Chelsea Pier, on December 3rd, said to be far superior to the New Yorker. Matt, I have a feeling you're about to disagree with that. Bigger as well, as they got 850 people in the place and could put 1,200 in for a big show if needed. Brian Alvarez in the Figure 4 wrote, Brian Gerwitz of WWE and Jesse Ward of TNA, a former Tough Enough One girl who is now a producer, were backstage at the show and spent some time backstage afterwards. Lance Storm was also there doing a shoot interview for the company. Of course, we'll see him later. So yeah, Matt, this was their first show in Basketball City. For people that don't know, Basketball City, I believe, was also like a practice facility for the New York Knicks basketball team. And I believe it was up on like the 3rd floor of a building. Matt, there's a lot of things people have said about Basketball City. I've never been to New York level Basketball City. What was Basketball City like?
Oh, right. Well, so, first of all, a few things. If you really want to know the insider perspective of Basketball City, you should listen to episode 91 of An Honorable Mention.
Yeah.
Where Shane Hagedorn talks about being on the ring crew and getting the ring into Basketball City through a fire escape and having to cut the steel cage in half and weld it back together.
That was an amazing story.
Getting it into the building. We also have some information from Eric Eels, which I don't know if you noticed that he emailed us a few hours ago, Trevor.
Oh, I didn't. Shit.
Yeah, so we'll get to that a little bit later. So we can get some extra information on this. But I'm just going to share my experience as a fan right now, which is, so it is true. So the original, or I don't know, maybe it wasn't even the original, but the old Basketball City, was up on, Pier 63, I believe it was, a little bit north of Chelsea Piers. So if you know New York City, that's where it was. And it was this weird pressurized dome thing. And there are dome buildings, but this one was because I guess the roof was air pressurized, you couldn't just walk in and open the doors. You had to go through, there were 2 ways to get in as a fan. You either went through a revolving door, or there was you went into an inner area and then they closed the other door behind you so they could open the door into the Basketball City arena. So getting in itself and getting out was a process, and it was up a few flights of stairs. But the other issue was, because of the way that the building was set up and how hard it was to get in and out, they didn't have any elevated seating. So, it was one of my least favorite experiences watching an ROH show. Not anything to do with the show or even the people there, but because, I got general admission tickets, which I usually get because, as I told you, Trevor, I'm a man of the people. And I normally you go to an ROH show with general admission, and either it has elevated like bleachers, or it's like just a small enough place that you could just stand in the back and see most of everything. Like I remember there were certain moments of Joe versus Kobashi where it was a little bit hard to see, but nothing too major. But I was like way far back, and like when I was sitting, I could see basically nothing. When I was
Oh
standing,
God.
I really couldn't see that much. So anytime like a wrestler like did stuff on the mat, they basically disappeared for me. And certainly on the
Yeah.
floor, you could see guys like the heads of guys walking around, but not much. Luckily, in the main event, there was enough stuff like on the cage and like stuff like up and like jumping and stuff like that
Hmm.
that I pretty much was able to enjoy the main event. But like the Bryan
Jack
Danielson
Evans did
match,
those cage spots just for you. He was like, Matt needs to see this stuff.
right. But
I
like
need
the
to give him
Bryan
a credit.
Danielson Rocky Romero match, I basically didn't really see. Like, like I couldn't get that watching it. And I mean, the New York City shows at the New Yorker Hotel and the shows at the Grand Ballroom of the Manhattan Center had such electric atmospheres.
Yeah.
And Basketball City, it wasn't bad, but it was like just like a dingy like venue that felt like it could have been anywhere. Like it didn't
Yeah.
have that special New York vibe to me anyway.
Hmm.
The good news about the my experience in Steel Cage Warfare was is that I realized if I was going to enjoy a show at Basketball City, I had to just get like normal, like close seats. So
You had to no longer be a man of the people.
that's right. So for the next show, they had one other show at Basketball City, which was Best in the World in March of 2006, and I got third or second row tickets to that, and that was a much more enjoyable experience. But yeah, it was not a good experience for the viewer if you did not have seats that were close, and it was just annoying getting in and out. And I could just imagine what a nightmare it was to set up and work as a as a ring crew or probably even any other kind of crew on that show. Now I'll say this: Basketball City still exists in Manhattan, but it's in a different location now. It's on the east side now, or like kind of like South Street, like
Hmm.
along the East River, and it's like a normal building with a roof and stuff that you can walk in and out of. So it's if they had a show there now, it probably be a little bit of a better experience. And there's like
Yeah.
light that comes in and stuff. But this show in the depths of December in just in this weird like dome thing. Yeah, it was not the best viewing experience. I don't want that to reflect on the show because I'm watching the show now, many years later and watching it on DVD. I don't have to worry about that. But as a live experience, it was one of the lesser ones during this era for me.
Yeah, like they were really hyping this up, like Gabe on commentary a few times. And like I mean, in a way, they needed to move to somewhere new because those New York, even though I agree, like the New Yorker Hotel had great atmosphere from the crowd and just a great kind of unique look. But obviously, those shows were incredibly cramped for the New York market. It
Yeah,
was
yeah.
small.
This was much bigger, much bigger.
I mean, we saw in those shows, New Yorker shows, where like it was so cramped that one side of the ring was basically pushed up right against the crowd barrier, so you had to basically kind of just scoot the wrestlers around that side. Like, but the problem was, you basically said it. Like the Basketball City, basically, all right, it's bigger, but then you lose every other advantage that the New Yorker places like that had. Like no atmosphere,
Yeah,
the crowd
I
doesn't
mean,
sound as good.
the fact that it was bigger is what made it hard for me to see because I was far
Yeah.
enough. Like it was big enough that it was like I could be far enough back that it was hard to see from the floor. You know?
And I think I bet you most people that listen to the show have been to a wrestling show, but for those who haven't or are young or don't live in a major city, but maybe are one day hoping, a pro tip I wish I knew when I was young and that you learned on this night, I think is it is almost if you are in a building. I mean, you didn't have a choice on this show, but if you are ever going to a show where there's like a floor and then like an elevated section, and you have the option between getting one of the very last rows on the floor or the elevated section or the like one of the first rows of the elevated section, always go elevated section. Like I remember when the first major wrestling show I ever went to was WCW Nitro. It was a birthday present, and I was like, I remember telling my parents like, if you can get me floor seats, get floor seats, like any floor seats, and we got literally the last row on the floor, and we had like maybe not quite as bad as you, but a similar experience where I was like, the riser was right behind me. I was like, we could have, the whole show, I was thinking, we could have saved money and had a way better view if we just took like first row of the elevated section right behind us. And instead, just because I was obsessed with the idea of if it's the floor, it has to be the best. Like, not all floor seats are created equal. That's the lesson to take away from this.
Definitely true. Yes, that is definitely a lesson. I never had another experience where it was this hard to see after this because I did learn that lesson.
So, Eric Eels, great listener who worked on the Ring of Honor ring crew. He sent an email. I did not catch it, so thank God, Matt, you caught it. I will read some excerpts of it right now. He wrote, greetings and salutations, gentlemen. I want to regale you with my memories of Steel Cage Warfare, aka Fuck Basketball City. I don't know if Matt went to the show. He did. So if so, this will be a very different perspective. Also, this will definitely be a long one, so feel free to piecemeal it. The build at Chelsea Piers was in an air pressure bubble within the gym, so you can only use the regular doors on the rotating door at one time, not both. On top of that, the elevator was broken, so everything had to be loaded up the outside stairs leading up to the fourth floor. In December, when it was snowing all day, as far as I can recall, if you haven't already heard Hagedorn talk about on Honorable Mention, we have. It really was the worst day ever for the ring crew. I know I'm not in the most in shape person, but even back then, I was 21, so I had the energy to make up for the belly to be able to carry all the beams, wood panels, etc. But I got so overwhelmed with body heat that at one point I had to excuse myself to go to one of the locker rooms to lie down and take off my heavy coat and sweatshirt. It was that bad. I can barely recall how we got the cage parts up there, but we fucking did it. The show itself was good. I remember watching the world title match with Xavier, who was visiting, and I remember feeling a little bad that he wasn't booked on the show and being involved. Matt, it seems like there's been 3 or 4 shows in 2005 after Xavier, recovered from his injury, where there have been reports of Xavier was backstage watching the show, and they never brought him back until that one show, that unscripted show where he wrestles Danielson.
Yep.
It's weird that he was such a they got so cold on him, even though that he was still showing there must be a story to that. I just don't know if anyone ever does know any reason why Xavier kind of kept clearly had a good enough relationship with heel to keep attending shows, but not to get booked. Through the years at gmail.com. I am fascinated by that.
There is one, at least, occasional listener that probably knows, but I'm not sure. We probably won't get him on record for this one.
Eric continues, Teardown wasn't as bad, but did have 2 humorous things going on. One was that they had Bobby Cruz ask the fans if they could bring their chairs with them back down the stairs to the first floor, as that was where they were stored, which some fans did.
God, I think I might have done that. I don't. It's hard at this point. It's very hard to remember, honestly.
Once again, Matt. Just knowing you, I would be, I'd be almost willing to risk a hefty sum of money that if someone told you to do the nice thing and take your chair back down the stairs, you would have done. I would be shocked if you were no, I'm not doing this.
But the question is, was I asked? Because yes, definitely, if I was asked, I would have done it.
2 was, as the other guys were tearing down the ring, I gathered up all the chairs left behind and tried to pile them together to be taken out later. As the curtains and poles for the entranceway went down, and I saw Lance Storm just sitting his chair straight forward, looking forward, and not even really moving or anything. He was waiting for Gabe and crew to bring him to his hotel room for his straight shooting interview they were going to record that night. As most of the wrestlers left the show and Teardown continued, he just sat there. I swear he didn't really move. He just sat and waited patiently.
That's a very, 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 very Lance Storm story, huh?
I just imagine him not even having a book, even though Lance Storm noted a bookworm, just sitting there, just unmoving, I will wait until I am told to go to a car, and just not even a thought in his head. Anyway, Eric continues, that brought a little levity to a very tense situation with getting everything back down as the snow continued to fall. Now, I will preface this by saying that I was 21 and most of the crew was in their early 20s, and there was a brief divide between the students and the non-students who helped out. And we've been there for you. We've been there for you all day, so there was friction bubbling up to the surface. Somewhere around 3 or 4 a.m., as we were finishing up, tensions boiled over as I was probably complaining why it was taking so long and got into it with Shane, almost leading to blows. I don't think anyone really tried to stop us from doing anything, but I think we just almost went to that tipping point and pulled back at the last moment. So yeah, those are my primary memories. And this email is long enough, so I won't even bother to get into the crash and flip with lighting director Mary's car on the way home.
Oh my gosh.
Trevor's eyes must be rolling back from reading all this. No, this is a fantastic email, Eric. Just wish Mary a happy birthday today, and thanks for all the entertainment and analysis. Take care.
Happy
Eric,
birthday,
one of the
Mary.
great listeners of the show, and happy birthday, Mary. Absolutely. And this is also one good thing to bring up too is you really like listening to like stories like this. Like I think the unsung heroes obviously of a lot of wrestling shows, and that's why I kind of like Undertaker kind of on his Hall of Fame speech giving like props to unsung heroes, or when Ultimate Warrior even did on his Hall of Fame speech. Like the people that just set up the shows in wrestling, they do not get enough credit. How much like just like unsexy, like sweaty, thankless, low to no paying work it is to do that, and how
it's probably it's probably sometimes sexy.
Well, depends on the promotion. Eric did say he had to take off his.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you so much, Eric. Seriously, like that was a huge addition to these stories that we're telling. And actually, can I go on a little tangent since you mentioned the Ultimate Warrior thing?
Absolutely.
It's just hilarious to me. And people say that apparently people think I bash WWE too much on this show, but somebody does anyway. But
that's your CM Punk thing.
Yeah.
One mildly negative review of the podcast that said we bash WWE too much. Well,
no, they said I do specifically.
You barely ever do. And by the way, this is a Ring of Honor podcast. That's like saying, like, if we had a podcast about Pepsi, someone saying, man, occasionally you say disparaging things about Coke. Like, what do you expect? Like,
I recently realized that I haven't tasted Pepsi in like more than 20 years. Or maybe not more than 20, but like at least 18. That's pretty crazy, right?
That's longer since I've been on a slide.
Yeah, exactly. That's a reference to a conversation we had a while ago. Anyway, but I am going to bash WWE here. Was what I'm setting up for. Well, no, it's just like it's really funny that the Ultimate Warrior was like, we should have an award for the unsung backstage heroes, like the people that do merchandise and music and whatever. And then WWE was like, oh yeah, we should have the Warrior Award where we just do PR and talk about how much we care about people who have diseases and like or just are heroes that we had nothing to do with, not that I'm sure the people who get those awards appreciate it and like it's a really nice moment and stuff. Like, so I'm not denigrating them at all. Like they all deserve awards, but it is just funny that they named it after the Ultimate Warrior, because that had nothing to do with what he was saying.
That is.
So I'm not criticizing the award or the recipients. I want to make that very clear, but I am criticizing the way they reappropriated the Ultimate Warrior's name for that particular award.
No, that has always blown my mind too. In fact, I think I wrote about that once. I think I wrote for my Patreon once, like a review of the first Ultimate Warrior documentary. And like, it's always blown my mind that this guy, like Ultimate Warrior, if you don't know, had a lot of not good opinions about people and things and freakly personality, if I said everything I thought about Ultimate Warrior and he was still alive, he'd probably send in more than a slightly irritated tweet to me. And one of the most genuine, nice, like thoughtful things he had ever did was, like you just said, on that Hall of Fame speech, he went out of his way to like do something that a lot of wrestlers that are far more well liked than Ultimate Warrior never did in their Hall of Fame speeches. Which just like props to all the workers that do not get like their due in behind the scenes in wrestling companies, and even goes out of his way to say there should be an award for this, a Jimmy Miranda award. And without him knowing it, it's like basically like Matt, think about this. I mean, it's not technically quite true, but it's almost like WWE basically ignored the Ultimate Warrior's dying wish. Like, it's one of the last things he ever said.
Okay, well, you said it, not me, but yeah.
I know, but I mean, like, he didn't mean it in this. It didn't say it on his deathbed, but literally, like, hours later, he died. It's one of the nicest things he ever said. Like, a really genuine, generous idea and thought that would have been very nice. And WWE, like you said, was just like, well, we can use this for PR. Like,
yes,
we can just, what they said, the part of this idea we like, Warrior, the part where we get to use your name.
Yes.
The rest of it we'll throw away.
Yeah, no, it's okay. So, like, and I just want to be really clear. Like, people like Chad Gaspard, like, absolutely deserve to be honored. Like, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. Like, he did a great thing, and, like, I'm, very, like, happy that for his family that he was able to be honored like that, right?
Yeah.
But, unrelated to that, Ultimate Warrior's idea was good too. Like, I support the idea of like behind the scenes workers that never get any respect, or I shouldn't say never get any respect, but never get any attention, or, and I'm sure a lot of them don't want it, but I'm sure some of them probably would like to be honored for their contributions. And that was a really
There's
nice
room for
idea.
both.
And like, you could do both. You could do both.
Yeah.
So you could
I
do,
mean, if
you
there's
could do, if you want to do this Warrior Award, like, and honor like people like Chad, like great, but like also do the Jimmy Miranda Award, like the Warrior mentioned, like, because that's a good idea too.
And, I know people will say, oh, well, the award shows are also partly a draw, and that's not sexy. You could fit one of those into an award show. And quite frankly, I bet you a lot of those people in WWE that have worked behind the scenes for years, if not decades, have some pretty interesting stories to tell. Like, I bet you, like, the seamstresses and all that stuff, I bet you they could tell you some fucking fun anecdotes, in a 10-minute speech.
Absolutely.
But anyway, so we will get to the show proper. I promise that we will get to it. We open with a brief clip of Jay Lethal and Samoa Joe as a tag team, followed by a clip of Jay Lethal walking away from Samoa Joe mid-promo at the end of the previous show. We then get a hot and fresh Jay Lethal promo here with an on-screen graphic telling us it's from ringofhonorwrestling.com. So again, Ring of Honor was really starting to push the, you're getting video angle development videos on the website, and some of them end up getting thrown onto the DVD first, but you're getting them on the website first. So, Ring of Honor getting into the digital media age, Matt. A somber Jay tells us that the start of a wrestler's career is very important, but he's ashamed of the one that he spent as a member of Special K. He credits Samoa Joe for getting him out of there and teaching him a lot. Jay says Joe became his family. In 2005, Jay did a lot of things on his own. He won the Pure title. He feuded with Low Key, but then Samoa Joe beat him for the Pure title, and he says he can't forget that. He keeps getting called Joe's protege all the time. He says there comes a time when a man stands alone, and says he challenges Joe to a match tonight, friend to friend. Jay promises to step out of Joe's shadow and says it's something that he needs to do. There was content here to make a good promo, but as we kind of talked about in a lot of these Jay Lethal promos, Jay tried a bit to emote, but at this point he just was mostly monotone, mumbly, and not a great verbal storyteller. And it's, again, Jay Lethal was 20 years old here. It's amazing that he was already a pretty darn good in-ring worker. So the fact that he was also not at the age of 20 yet a good promo, like, that's no great, like, big dig on him. But the impression I got on recent shows, and especially on this show, is just he was not ready to carry, like, the character aspect of any big angle or promo or moment.
Yeah, but it's admirable that they tried,
Yeah.
I think it's worth trying, and he was definitely getting better, right? Like, it's not like
Yes.
this was clearly a lot of better of a promo than he would have cut even like 6 months earlier, so it's not all bad, but yeah, no, he wasn't ready for quite this. I will say it was interesting that it was very clearly to me a parallel, like probably intentional, to the promo that Joe cut before A Night of Tribute, where it was sort of like this slow, measured journey through his career, like the way Joe did for him, but in relation to Samoa Joe. So I think overall, like, I think this was a positive, even though the promo delivery wasn't particularly good.
And I wonder if a lot of this too was because both of those promos, what they also have in common is that they were both for a couple of the first promos for the Ring of Honor website. If maybe Gabe was kind of thinking like, I want these kind of promos for the website to be kind of things that are very newbie friendly. Like, we will explain not just this feud, but basically like half of this wrestler's history in the company. So,
makes sense to me. I think that sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, as a kind of a gateway entry. I don't know how many people's first exposure to the Ring of Honor would be just like a random video on the website, but I could see that being maybe why both these promos were like, I think that was a really good point that you caught just there about like, they are both very much like, let me go through the last year, or in Joe's case, let me go through like the last 4 years. And maybe that is why. But next we go to Ring of Honor Commissioner Jim Cornette in an office somewhere. He says Nigel McGuinness is still on tour with Pro Wrestling Noah in Japan. Claudio Castagnoli's on tour in Mexico, so that is why they are not on the show this week. This show. Jim says Nigel made him look foolish on a recent Ring of Honor show when Jim said there'd be deserving champions, and then while Cornette was in a backstage meeting, Nigel, when he was wrestling Claudio, produces a foreign object and gets Claudio DQ'd by framing him for using it. Jim says next time Claudio and Nigel are on the same show, there will be a pure title rematch between the two, and for the first time in Ring of Honor history, there will also be 2 referees, one in the ring, one outside. Jim then warns Homicide's thugs and Colt Cabana not to interfere in tonight's Homicide versus Steve Corino match, or there will be some heavy fines. The heavy fine thing always gets you. Like, that's the part, one of those Jim Cornette things that seems outdated because, like, I feel like there's a way, even though where all fans know wrestling isn't real now, like you can still give stakes. Like if you say, if anyone interferes in this match, they're not in the promotion for like they're not booked for 6 months. Even though we all know like the storyline is fake, the stip can be real. Everyone watching this knows like Cole Cabana or anyone that interferes is not getting fined. But that's a delightfully old school touch, I would say, I guess.
I will say this. I thought this was the best Jim Cornette like remote promo so far because it answered a lot of the criticisms we've had the past few months. Because, we criticized the idea that Jim Cornette, came in and saying titles, people who win titles are going to deserve it. And, we're going to follow the rules here. And then he actually acknowledges, like, Nigel made him look stupid. So we're, this, and also he acknowledged, because we were wondering, like, how's Claudio getting another title shot after he lost and then keeps losing, right?
Yeah.
And then Jim Cornette's like, well, because of the way he lost last time, we're going to get, just to kind of get back at Nigel. So I actually really appreciated the little touches they put into this promo to make things make sense. Because I don't think most wrestling companies would have even bothered with that at that point. They'd be like, oh, that was 2 months ago, whatever, let's move on. The other thing is, I will say this too, on the negative side, if Cornette is mad about people getting away with breaking rules, there are things he's not going to like about this show.
We'll get into that, but no, that's a great point too, especially because I think one of Jim Cornette's big strengths, and it was particularly like people would talk about this back when he booked Ohio Valley Wrestling, which used to be WWF's developmental company, is that the people would always say one of Cornette's great strengths as a booker there was like he could get like tossed like things that would really screw up his booking and find ways to make them make sense. Like WWF would do things with some of his wrestlers that would like kind of upset his plans, and he would always find ways to kind of like justify and explain it and work it into his plans. And so like, this is the strength of Jim Cornette is you can have kind of mad booking about the details of things, and Jim Cornette can come up with a reason, I'm sure probably in like 5 minutes of thinking, that sounds compelling and reasonable about like, well, this is the why. This, it doesn't seem like Claudio just lost 2 matches in a row since he lost his last title shot. Why is he getting another title shot when you say like title shots have to be earned? And like you said, like Cornette just very quickly comes up with a good reason. So there was 2 dark matches on the show. Most interesting for the fact that they were not the usual Ring of Honor dark matches where it's Ring of Honor students. These were all wrestlers from the, I guess, newly shut down Pro Wrestling Iron promotion in California, which was also a wrestling school run by Ring of Honor alums Donovan Morgan and Mike Modest. The 2 dark matches were Oliver John defeats Ryan Drago, and Joey Harder, what a name, defeats Apollo Khan. The one person people might know would be Ryan Drago, who fans would know better as Simon Gotch, aka Simon Grimm, to pay if you follow him in the WWE or the Indies. And Dave Meltzer in his little live report wrote, John, who works like a 70s heel, was the most impressive. So now I assume you have no memories of these matches if you even saw them.
Yeah, I'm honestly not sure if I even saw them, honestly.
Yeah. So, and that brings us to the opener that everyone gets to see if they buy the DVD, is a tag team match. Jason Blade and Kid Makazi defeated the Ring Crew Express of Dunn and Marcos in 9 minutes, 54 seconds, when Makazi pinned Marcos after he hit what Prazak on commentary calls an inverted shooting star press. What I would say is it's just Makazi is standing backward on the top rope, like he's facing the crowd. He jumps backwards, but does a forward flip with his legs landing on Marcos. So almost like a tumbleweed leg drop, but he's just facing the opposite direction. Very cool move. Matt, we had recently seen this match on our show. This is just a rematch with a different result and a few minutes longer. What'd you think about it?
Yeah, well, the first one, I think we both kind of agreed it was kind of fun, but it was like pretty sloppy. Mm-hmm. And this one, less sloppy. I think more intense. Still some sloppiness. I will say that. There are a few things. The first noteworthy thing of the night to me was Jimmy Bauer is back on commentary. Lenny Leonard, I guess, was sick and couldn't do the show, so we get Gabe for the whole show, which I don't know. I sort of thought it was a treat.
Yeah.
Not that I don't love Lenny Leonard, but it was a nice change of pace. I missed Gabe on commentary a little bit, doing something other than that shtick where he's like, "Oh, you're drunk again," like, I don't know. There's charm in Jimmy Bauer on commentary. A classic ROH sound, I guess, is what I would say. Um, but yeah, like no, they're Blade and Mikaze do cool moves. I will say that, but it's not tight like you get with some of these like real top notch aerial guys. Um, they do some cool double team stuff, a double Japanese arm drag, which is really cool. Mikaze does his spinny kicks. I always like them in the matches we've seen so far. Um, there are a couple of, like I said, awkward spots. Like at one point, Dunn messes up a roll up, and the crowd is very unforgiving. They're booing him a lot for that. I'm like, wow, this is not a nice crowd of nice people. That's how I would describe it. Not a nice crowd of nice people. And there was another one where Marcos does this like really awkward Northern Lights bridging suplex on Mikaze, and Gabe says, "Nicely done." But I was like, I mean, that's not the move I would have said that on. There were things in this match that were nicely done, but that wasn't one of them. But it's just a little bit more of an intense version of what we saw. There is they work over Mikaze for a long time, Dunn and Marcos do. But then when Blade comes in, he doesn't really do a hot tag. He just sort of does a blind tag on an Irish whip. And then he kind of, while Mikaze's running the ropes, he does a surprise dive onto Dunn on the outside, and then Blade comes in with a crossbody for 2. So they kind of avoided the hot tag for some reason, but they still did some cool moves at the end. And like you said, the final spot with that, I guess, reverse or inverted shooting star press was really cool. And Mikaze got the win off of that. So, I feel like it was very similar to the first match, but I would say half a star better just in terms of the level of work. That's how I would say it.
I kind of felt this was on like another decent above average match from these two teams. I thought it was on the same level, but for different reasons. I agree with you. The way I would put it is I thought this was, like you said, less botchy, although there was still, as you pointed out, some botches, but also a little bit slower maybe because it was longer. So it's kind of like pick your poison. Do you want to be kind of more of a slap bang, like few minutes and really sloppy, or just kind of sloppy and more of a full length match? It's kind of up to you. I would say Mikaze and Blade continued like to mildly impressed. Sounds like more of a diss. And after that CM Punk tweet, man, I am worried about how my words come out. But I would say like the way I would put them so far,
moderately impressive. How about that?
Exactly. Yeah. Like the way I would put it is like in their performances so far, I never go like, wow, they stole the show. But every time it's like, I could see more of that. Like they do well. They do well enough. Like I think on every show so far, they have broken out like a new cool, at least one cool new double team spot, which I appreciate. And they're just so far in their few matches, they've been good at just having like spot oriented, kind of fun, quick, kind of mindless action fun matches. And my favorite moment here actually was Blade hits an inverted atomic drop, and he just stays in the kneeling position and holds his opponent in place. And then Mikaze runs up Blade's back and hits, I forget it was Don Marcos, with a knee in the face. And I thought that was just like a really neat. And again, one of the biggest compliments I can give to a move when I'm watching wrestling from 17 years ago is like, someone should use that today because it would get over. Because it's just, that's a really cool move that you don't really see. With Don Marcos,
all right, I'll use it.
When you and Punk team up on me, you can do the run, Matt.
Okay. No, I think I want to knee you in the crotch, so I'll do the atomic drop.
Matt, you don't have to wait for a match to do that. But so Dunn and Marcos, I feel bad because I'm a big Dunn and Marcos fan, but I continue to feel like on these, and their string is running out in Ring of Honor. They will be back for a few more matches in 2006, but like, I just feel like I've kind of seen everything there is to them. Like they are a team that they're a great undercard act, but they're, I think I've said this before. I wish they kind of were in the territory days, because they're the kind of act where they should be able to do this act for their entire careers. But whenever it kind of gets stale in one place, just take it to a new territory. And unfortunately, this wasn't really the era where they could do that. And
they'd be really fresh in AEW. Tony Khan, hint, hint.
I would watch, a Dunham Marcos match. Like, put them on Dark for a match. But I don't know what shape they're in right now. But I mean, there would be at least 5 fans of that crowd who would get a big kick out of it. We wouldn't even have to be 2 of them. And Matt, I'm also glad you point out that Lenny isn't on commentary. This is probably just me reading too much into things. I have no idea if this is real or not, but I did think it was interesting that this is the show Lenny's not on commentary on. Well, on the last show, we had that little news story that's saying that Lenny had gotten in an argument with Gabe backstage at FIP, but they had smoothed it all out. And then the very next show, probably when they were recording commentary, Lenny's on. And there was kind of some weird comments where they say Lenny has some food poisoning from bad sushi, and Gabe's like, must have been some really bad sushi. And also, did you notice that Prazak is threatening Gabe? Was like, Gabe, if you don't do your job, like Mark Nolte is waiting in the wings. And it almost felt like a bit of a dig, but not really. But it was funny that they even brought him up at all. And because at one point in commentary, the thing that made me just wonder if this was more of just during that brief whatever, or maybe it really was just sickness, was just because at one point Gabe is he says something at one point where he's like, I wonder if I'm back for good. And I was like, part of me wonders if there was for a brief second they were thinking might this have to be the team? If Lenny for some reason doesn't stay there, is it just back to Gabe and Prazak? I don't know, but
I guess at least temporarily it would be.
Yeah, but Lenny comes back on the next show. We go backstage to Austin Aries. He says that so this is something every member of Generation Next and the Embassy gets a promo, or at least the opportunity to cut a promo backstage to kind of set up the main event tonight between them and Steel Cage Warfare, which, I will say this, almost basically all these promos are there's not much substance to them. A lot of them aren't very good, but I do appreciate little touches like this to try and make a match or a show seem different and more important. I like that everyone here, since it's a big feud ending match, everyone gets a chance to talk. Aries here says, when he got into wrestling, a wise man told him that you have to separate business from personal matters. Aries says he's done that to make his way to the top, but somewhere along the line, it got personal between him and Alex Shelley and him and Prince Nana. At this point, I wrote my notes, really, Austin? You don't know why it got personal between you and Alex Shelley. You turned on him and beat the crap out of him on a show and kicked him out of his own stable. But anyway, because Aries was very much this pro, I don't know what happened. I'm that's the energy of this promo. Aries says Nana having life handed to him on a silver platter gets to him. Tonight in Steel Cage Warfare, there will be nowhere to hide, and Generation Next will stake its claim as the top faction in Ring of Honor.
My favorite part of either of these two promos is that after Nana was done, he says, you're going to see blood and everything you thought you didn't see. And then as they cut away, as he's walking off, and you see that ROH logo flash the screen for the wipe,
Mm-hmm.
He just adds one extra, you fools, while he's off screen, cut away. I'm just that is perfect.
So yeah, we cut to Prince Nana backstage. Nana says he will put Generation Next in their grave tonight. He says you're going to see blood. I thank God you caught that, because I did not, for whatever reason, include that in my notes for that part. The second part of not just what you will see apart from blood. And he laughs at Jade Chung's recent incident of getting her face bashed in by the greetings from Ghana. He says tonight the Embassy will be established as the top faction in Ring of Honor. And that brings us to the Ring of Honor top of the class trophy match. Davey Andrews successfully defends the trophy when he defeats Pele Primo by ref stoppage in 1 minute 27 seconds when Pele passed out in a side choke. I think this was Pele Primo's main show debut, at least in a match. He was certainly an extra, I believe, in the angle we saw where Chad Collier bashed Ace Steel's head in with the chair and made him bleed buckets. He was like a prop in that. But this is his first match, I believe, on a main card. And what I will say is Pele showed about as much personality, I think, as a wrestler possibly can in 87-second squash match that you lose. He's running around screaming like a little Spitfire. He's throwing these cool, futile little underdog strikes. He's selling, I would say, the right kind of over the top, where he's selling, out on his feet in a big way. And then that old, I'm held up only by the ropes stuff. He gets murdered with a slap, then a German suplex and a power bomb. I just wrote my notes. In a minute and a half, tiny Spitfire Pele was already way more interesting than competent, growly rookie who is stiff Davey Andrews. And that's nothing really against Davey Andrews, but it's just to me, I was already way more interested in Pele Primo in this minute and a half. And Also, did you notice, Matt, before the match started, Pele Primo does Hook's entrance. He puts his head on the turnbuckle with his back to Davey Andrews, and then when like the bell sounds, he like turns around and starts running at Andrews, and of course gets his ass kicked. But Hook, huge Pele Primo fan, you heard it here first.
I genuinely didn't notice that. I will say this, I agree with you about Pele, although I definitely think I'm higher on Davey Andrews than you. Like I always have been. I've been enjoying him for the past few shows, so I definitely don't have the thought that you have. But I agree with you. Pelly did a really good job in the time that he had. I did think, though, the one other notable thing besides what you said is it was funny that so after Pelly tries his little flurry, Davey covers up and then he just smacks Pelly in the face and knocks him down. And there's this really loud "you got bitch slap" chant, which was, common in ROH at the time. But I was just like, man, if only this crowd was at the Oscars, what would have happened? We're being topical on this episode, so I might as well have done that joke, right?
We're the last people to get a Will Smith Chris Rock joke. The door is we're closing the door because we're the last people in this house. But I don't mind. Like Davey Andrews, I think it was pretty good for his level of experience. I mean, most of the Ring of Honor rookies, well, at least the ones that kind of became more notable, I think were good for the very limited experience they had. Maybe not very good, but like better than I think a lot of people would be with that fresh out of wrestling school with that few number of matches and those matches being as short as many of them were. But I just feel like, Davey Andrews is an archetype we've seen a lot in wrestling, which is like growly, stiff guy with kick pads or whatever. And, there's great wrestlers that do that, but I feel like it's a little less fun than the Pele role. And also the problem is like that role goes better, Pele's, with how Ring of Honor students were booked, because like it is hard to come off as like a great badass like Davey Andrews kind of style would point him to at this point when he gets booked like the highest of the students, but still like a student who gets treated pretty badly, as we will see in a second.
I think the angle that you're about to talk about was clearly building up to something that never came because Davey Andrews left, right?
Yes. Yeah, for those who don't know, this is the second last Ring of Honor show Davey Andrews ever does, because he quits wrestling after Final Battle, the next show. And I don't know why, and I'm not even going to try and find out why, because I know from listening to the Honorable Mention podcast, like, how our quest with wrestling was to try and find Matt Thompson, the fabled super tall giant rookie who had like one impressive performance in Ring of Honor in the first year, and
the quest is not over. The quest is not over. Tony Khan's going to bring him back. He's going to find him. He's going to pay him insane amounts of money, and he's going to be Samoa Joe's protege against that giant guy that Jay Lethal brought out. It's going to happen.
That guy, he's to appeal to the Indian market. The other market is the through the ears market. They're going to appeal with him. But
we need to get through to the deep vein thrombozos. Although, you know what? I think they've already done a lot to do that.
Yeah.
I feel like they've been targeting us for a while.
But I was just saying, the Honorable Mention guys, I feel like if they have any sort of quest that is equivalent to our Matt Thompson quest, it is, they have been trying to find out like what the hell happened to Davey Andrews and why he just dropped off the face of the earth. And if they don't know, especially because Shane Hagedorn like worked ring crew, traveled with, like, trained with Davey Andrews, and if he can't find it out, there's no chance I'm going to find it out. So that is their quest. So if anyone can help them, get in contact with them, because, like, they have their own Ring of Honor mystery there. But so after the match, a bunch of students rush in to check on Pele and hand Davey his top of the class trophy. We get a quick, weird, odd jump cut to Reyes just in the ring. We cut out his little entrance, and he's holding a mic. Ricky Reyes, he wants to know why Ring of Honor set up a match for these ass clowns. And
he says ass clowns twice.
Ricky Reyes, big Chris Jericho fan. He says he's squashed all the students in under a minute, and now he wants to beat the crap out of all of them one by one together right now. He proceeds to do that very quickly. He destroys 5 students in short order, just a couple moves each.
We get to see some Rhett Titus here and the Dempseys.
Yeah, and they attack him like one by one, and Davey Andrews just watches in the corner. Like, it just looks kind of stupid. And then when he turns back after he takes out all these students, Ricky Reyes, Davey Andrews then blindsides him with a spear, and they brawl, but Reyes quickly gets the advantage and then creams Andrews with the top of the class trophy. He gently positions the trophy in the ring. He walks on top of Andrews, then spits on Andrews, and just walks out of the ring and leaves Andrews laying. I thought that this was like the most personality Reyes has shown in Ring of Honor. I thought he actually showed some charisma, like just destroying these guys and on the mic. And I thought this segment also surprisingly got somewhat over with the crowd. Like they weren't really into it. Didn't sound like to me like they were very into, oh, here's Ricky Reyes. But by the time they were done, I think they were kind of into him just destroying students.
Yeah, though his talking was actually not bad, except for overuse of the word ass clowns.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, it got them cheering the heel as he punked out the. This is yet again. It seems like every match Davey Andrews has had is winning the top of the class trophy has been him getting squashed by a heel. Like first it was Adam Pearce, then Jimmy Rave. Now not even a match. It's Ricky Reyes. But at this point, what's the point of even complaining? It's the Ring of Honor students, so they're the lowest order on the totem pole. And then in addition to that, Again, Davey, I don't know if Ring of Honor knew this at this time, but Davey Andrews would be gone in one more show anyway. So
I do think if they had gotten finally to the match and Davey Andrews won, I do think that would have gotten over pretty big.
Mm-hmm.
The Reyes Davey Andrews match, which I'm almost positive that's what they were building to, and Davey Andrews would have beaten him. I think that would have gotten over pretty well, personally.
Yeah. Unfortunately, does not happen that way. Next, we have a Roderick Strong backstage promo. Roddy is wearing what I can only describe as one of my grandmother's blue sweaters. It appears he stole that from her wardrobe. Strong says Rave has only made things worse, taking out Jay Chung, laying him out on the last show. And then in a moment, Matt, that really makes me laugh, Roddy, and really trying to be serious and hype up the show, he says, and I quote, December 3rd, Basketball City, Steel Cage Warfare. And I just wrote, that does not sound as badass as you think it does. Like, one disadvantage to running shows on Basketball City is you can never say, it's not like saying, WrestleMania, April 3rd, Madison Square Garden. You can't say Steel Cage Warfare, Basketball City. Like, that sounds, it's like Polo Wonderland, SummerSlam. Like, what?
Sports Plus.
Roddy says he's going to give Rave backbreakers until he can't walk and pound his face until it's broken in pieces. I kept thinking for like 5 minutes after this promo of things like that of just like, November 22nd, All Out, Dave and Fuddruckers, like just stuff like that.
Well, there is a major arena called like the Smoothie King Center, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like stuff like that I would love. Next, we have a Jimmy Rave backstage promo. Jimmy, meanwhile, if Roderick stole one of my grandma's sweaters, Jimmy looks like he's like me or anyone I knew dressed up for their 4th grade class photo. It's kind of adorable, actually. Rave says he beat AJ Styles. He sent CM Punk packing out of Ring of Honor, and tonight he cements his legacy by taking out Generation Next once and for all.
It's a really good heel line for Jimmy Rave to say he sent CM Punk packing, even though CM Punk beat him very soundly in the feud and didn't leave the company until 2 or 3 months after he was done having any interaction with Jimmy Rave.
Maybe the idea is just I was so annoying to CM Punk that he eventually left to get away from me. That could be true. I mean, I very relatable. But next up, we have a Ring of Honor Tag Team title match. Sal Rinauro and Tony Mamaluke successfully defend the titles when they defeat Colt Cabana and Milano Collection AT in 15 minutes, 22 seconds when Rinauro pinned Milano after he and Mamaluke hit them with a double team elevated DDT. I guess I would kind of describe it as almost like the KRS-One that the Kings of Wrestling, Claudio and Chris Hero used to do, but ending in a DDT. So basically you take a guy, you kind of set him so he's lying horizontally on both your shoulders, and then you just drop them down into, in this case, a DDT. Really cool finisher, actually. Matt, kind of a weird, just thrown together team. Gabe actually does, I thought this was Gabe's best moment of commentary the whole night. An example, one of the strengths Gabe could actually add occasionally to commentary, which is as Booker. He can explain things. Because going into this, I was kind of like the Cornette thing earlier with Nigel and Claudio going, why the hell is this match for a title? Colt and Milano have had exactly 0 matches as a tag team here in Ring of Honor. But Gabe on commentary says Sal and Tony put on an open contract. He says similar to the ones they answered. So basically, the idea is, they answered open contract to win the tag title, so they're kind of returning the favor here. And then he says Colt answered the open call, and then he picked Milano because since he was wrestling 2 Italians, he felt he needed an Italian influence to defeat the Italian champs. So I actually thought that was kind of a cute way to explain a clearly very thrown together makeshift who do we got available like how do we use them on the show kind of match. But Matt, what do you think about the match itself in terms of the quality of it?
Well, speaking of wrestlers who surprisingly don't have any other matches in Ring of Honor after Final Battle, we have Milano Collection AT, who Gabe says very early on in the match will be a mainstay in ROH well into 2006. So, oops. But I did like this match. Like more than I thought. Like it did feel very thrown together, but I thought both teams did a good job. I was especially impressed, honestly, with Renaro and Mama Luke. I feel like if they had stuck with them or built them up more, like to be like make more sense as a top tag team, I feel like they could have been a good tag team, like in the longer range. Because I do think they did some good stuff together. I enjoyed this match. It wasn't like a great match or anything. But given that it got a decent amount of time, and it was solidly worked, and I thought it really kept the crowd. Which a match this thrown together with tag team champions that had the reputation of not being that over, it could have easily not gotten over, and I think it did. One part early that I enjoyed was Milano and Mama Luke were squaring off, and Cabana yells, "Out wrestle him, Milano!" And I thought that was pretty good advice for a wrestling match. To tell him to out wrestle his opponent. I think that's actually pretty smart to try to tell him to do. There was one point early in the match when they were like on the mat, and you could hear the crowd chanting, "Sit the fuck down!" And I was thinking as I watched this, like, oh, I know why they said that. I experienced wanting people to sit down too during that match. Gabe also points out at different points that Cabana is much more serious here, like not cracking smiles, and like that he's been changed by the Homicide feud. And it is true. Like, he does some of his wacky wrestling stuff, but he's not joking around, He's not like, "Oh, look up there," and then, does, stuff like that. He's wrestling seriously. And I thought he did a good job with it. Milano and Cabana do this thing where they lift up Sal by opposite legs and spread them, like splitting him apart as they show him off to each side of the ring, which was a fairly clever tag team spot. And then Mama Luke breaks that up by hitting a missile dropkick to the backs of both Milano and Cabana. I like that. So they work on Renaro for a while, and they get the hot tag to Tony, even though the crowd isn't that hot for it. But I thought Mama Luke does a good job. He does some hot moves, some cool pinning combos. He does like this horse collar stretch muffler thing on Milano where but then Milano gets his hand on the bottom rope. And now they work over Milano's leg for a while and cut off the ring. And they get some, they do some, I think they do some cool double teams and near falls. And finally they get the hot tag to Cabana. And the crowd is pretty hot for that. So you could tell they want a title change. And I really like Cabana's title change. I mean, not title change, hot tag a lot. Because for two reasons. And maybe you can guess what one of them is. So he does a bunch of slow, like Dusty Rhodes style elbows and ducks a double clothesline and hits a quebrada. But the number one reason why I like Cabana's hot tag, you might be able to guess because you know what I hate about Ring of Honor hot tags. Do you think you can guess? He doesn't do the thing that I hate about Ring of Honor hot tags.
He doesn't immediately tag back out again?
Exactly. He actually wrestles for a while.
What a low bar to clear. But yeah, he absolutely does not do that.
Yes. But it is a low bar, but I really liked it for that reason. And then they start hitting their big spots. Mama Luke does a bridging German suplex, but Sinclair won't count because he's not legal. Renaro does that snappy run-up moonsault thing that he does, which I like. Milano does this cartwheel into the leaping clothesline, which I always like. Once Milano does get in after a reasonable length of time, he does the Armani shoe exchange. Mama Luke breaks up the pin. And then they do that spike DDT thing, which felt out of nowhere, but it was a really cool finishing move. And I don't know. I thought this was a good, hard-hitting match. Like, a good match. I'm not saying great, but like a solidly good match and better than I expected in terms of heat and intensity. The crowd definitely booed the finish. I will say that because they wanted the title change. But after they do applaud once everyone starts shaking hands. And Mama Luke even gave Milano the Italian flag after the match, so that was pretty heartwarming too.
Yeah, I agree with your thoughts on this match. It's certainly not like a show stealer or something you have to go out of your way to see, but I would say like this is outright just a good wrestling match. Like not even like above average or kind of entertaining. This is just outright a good piece of wrestling for 15 minutes. And I guess it shouldn't be that surprising because I think all these guys have talent. One that I would disagree on is, well, I thought everyone did fine. Like, no one was bad in this match. I actually was more impressed with Colt and Milano. Like, I just was one of those matches where I really appreciate both of them. Milano in particular, I've just been really impressed in all his Ring of Honor performances. And, well, I guess the Claudio match wasn't that special, but even that, I thought he did some good individual work within it. They had Claudio and, not Claudio, Colt and Milano had like a surprising number of like double teams and interactions together for a team that, at least to my knowledge, had never worked anywhere together before. Like even like little things, like you mentioned, like the big hanging double leg stretch. I liked even just little stuff. Like at one point, Milano poses after doing a drop kick and Colt fixes his hair for him. Like just stuff like that. It's just like, oh, they already have like this little bit of chemistry and
a shtick.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed that. I thought this match was the most fun when it was Colt and Milano on offense, but luckily they were on offense quite a bit. There was when Mamaluke came in at one point. I do feel like there was like a sequence there where he came in where he and Colt were just like not on the same page for a little bit. You can just see like they're both kind of waiting for someone to. Yeah, it's almost like the equivalent of when you're ever like in an aisleway at a supermarket or something, and like you're like, you go, no, you go, and you kind of keep stepping on each other's toes. It was kind of like they both kind of didn't know what the other wanted to do. But overall, good match, and I did kind of feel bad. Like I still don't know if like I feel like Mamaluke and Renaro didn't have a lot of chemistry with each other as a team. Maybe they could have developed that over time. But I do think they are both talented wrestlers. So I agree with you. Like in a way, it's a shame that they got thrown together. And like the reign is almost over, and it's another. We've seen this a few times in Ring of Honor where an act that isn't working. Sometimes like their best performance comes right before they're given up on, and this was like maybe their best match together. I mean,
yeah, and I think that's not just an ROH thing. I think that's wrestling in general that happens.
But like to show you like how they're still like they're still trying to they've been the tag team champions for a few shows, and they're still trying to figure out like what's a good tag team finisher, because this is like a completely new one for them. So like they were still trying to figure out fundamental parts of being a tag team, and their reign as the champs was almost over.
I wonder if that double electric chair thing maybe just felt too dangerous for people, and that's why they stopped doing it. I don't know, because that was a good finisher.
I think they hit it the one time, and then the second time they botched it. So I wonder if after the second time they said, well, like, we just can't do this if we can't like hit it good every time.
Yeah.
I don't know how difficult that move is to do, but obviously they did not even attempt it in this match. They broke out something new. Yeah, so good match. Yeah, like you mentioned, I felt kind of bad that even though Renaro and Mamaluke were not heels, like by the end of the match, it was clear that they wanted Colt and Milano, a team that had never teamed together before, half of it being a guy that only wrestled a handful of times in Ring of Honor. They were clearly the team that like the fans wanted to win, and I felt kind of bad. But yeah, the fans will get their wish very shortly. We cut to Matt Sydal backstage. Matt recounts his history in Ring of Honor, how he started with a tag team called the Air Devils, and after only one match together, the Embassy jumped him before he could even get started in Ring of Honor. He says, tonight Generation X proves that they're the future. I actually did like that they kind of tied that in, like they reminded you, oh yeah, like the Embassy, even though Fast Eddie, the guy who turned on him, is no longer a member of the Embassy, he's just disappeared off the face of the earth. They go to the effort of reminding you, like, technically, Matt Sydal has his own grudge against these guys. And then we get an on-screen graphic that says, we tried to get comments from Abyss. Our cameraman ended up in the hospital. There will be no comments from Abyss, which I thought was very cute.
Yeah, that's exactly what I wrote. Cute.
Yeah. And next up, we have the Ring of Honor World Title match. Bryan Danielson successfully defends the title, defeating Rocky Romero, who was escorted to the ring by Julie Smokes and Ricky Reyes, via submission in 15 minutes, 26 seconds, when he made him tap to a single leg Boston Crab.
This was the match that was also on Dynamite, which is just bonkers.
Yeah. And it's funny because this is one of those matches. I'm going first on this one, but I'm going to be really interested in hearing what you think about this match, because this is one of those matches where I liked it a lot more than I saw online reviews liked it. Like a lot of online reviews are giving this like 2.5, like under 3 stars. I had to give this a star rating. I would say it just squeaks into 4 stars. I thought this was outright great. I really enjoyed this. I think actually, not to kind of tip my hand too much, I think this is my match of the show actually. which people might not expect just like looking at the card on paper. Um, Part of me wonders though if I appreciate this match more just because we've been rewatching every Danielson match in Ring of Honor in order. Because there are sometimes I feel like we, or especially me, I like or dislike matches more than I would if I just dropped in cold, depending on the context of, oh, I've seen this so much lately, or oh, this really builds nicely off of something. And what I really liked about this match is how different it is from every other of the Danielson title defenses so far. Like, instead of a 30-plus minute epic, which almost all of his title defenses have been, this is just a very tight 15. Instead of Danielson kind of bullying and dominating, almost kind of eating up his opponent, it's way more 50-50 here. Romero is just as big of a dick to Danielson as Danielson is to him, and that's a lot of the fun of this. It's like they're just being kind of dicks. Even stylistically, like the match is different than a lot of Ring of Honor matches where it's mostly like strikes, a lot of kicks and submissions. To the point where it's so kick and submission based that when Romero just hits a couple of his standard signature moves near the end of the match, which is springboard dropkick and a tiger suplex, they actually felt big to me just because I was like, whoa, I didn't expect to see wrestling moves in this grappling and this MMA match. And I mean, it wasn't really MMA thing, but they popped more because of that. There's just so many cool little unique touches where there's just little things that you don't see in every match. Like Romero actually popping out of Danielson's surfboard. You don't see that often. Danielson using a lot of open hand slaps, which turned into a big slap war late in the match. Danielson actually doing foot stomps, like little things you don't see in a lot of Ring of Honor matches. Even just the way Bryan and Rocky sell while in standard submissions, I thought was just on an extra good level. They sold it way bigger than you normally would see, like standard submissions being sold in a match. Of recent Danielson matches, I've said they were all great, and they have been. Some really great. But a lot of them, if you wanted to nitpick, felt like he could have had them with anyone decently talented because he controlled them so much and kind of dominated them so much. This match, I wouldn't put this above the Roderick Strong matches, but what this match has for it is it feels like a real collaboration between him and Romero, like something that only they could do in this combination, these two guys together. Like, it's very much a product of both of them. And I think that's some of the magic of wrestling, where you throw two wrestlers together and you kind of see what unique match comes from just their personalities and styles hitting. And again, not an outright, like, it's not going to be on my match of the year list, but 4 stars. I thought this was great.
Yeah, I mean, my only disappointment with this match is that you took everything that I wanted to say. Yeah, like, I was, vacillating between like 3 3/4 and 4 stars. I think 4 is perfectly sensible for this match. And yeah, what I liked about it is that Danielson did not dominate the way he did in the other matches. He really, like, clearly respected Romero a lot. Not that he didn't respect, like, Chris Sabin or Roderick Strong, obviously he did, or Chris Daniels, but, like, this is a different kind of thing. Like, clearly it's like, oh, Rocky is a guy that I know real well and will do something special with. And I think he decided to do something special. He wore the black trunks and the kick pads, which he had not been wearing during this title run, clearly to show, like, okay, this is like my MMA style match or whatever it is, and he does do something different. They do a lot of kicks and headbutts and all that stuff on the ground. And I actually like the point that Gabe made to make this make sense, which is that he says Rocky made Danielson tap many times at the New Japan dojo. And then he also mentions that, Rocky got this match because he won the trios tournament, and they all got, certain matches that they could have. And Rocky won the trios tournament. How many months earlier was that? 9 months earlier? 10 months earlier? Something like that? 9 months, I guess? 8 months?
It was fairly early on in the year.
Yeah, it was March. Yeah. So, I guess that's
and this is December.
Yeah. So 9 months earlier, right?
Yeah.
So, but Gabe actually makes it make sense that it took so long, because he says, like, oh, Rocky waited until Danielson was the champion because he knows Danielson. He might have his number. And, like, that made the matchup make sense, even though Romero has always been way lower on the totem pole than Danielson is, right? Rocky was never presented as a world title threat. And I don't think this crowd took him as a real threat to the world title, but they did take him enough that they could suspend disbelief and allow themselves to buy into the match. The match never gets to the point where there are, like, dramatic near falls or anything like that, right? Yeah. So it was a good in a different way. They're just doing a lot of cool stuff, and it's fast paced, and it's, it really sucked that when I was there live, I really couldn't enjoy it because so much of the stuff was on the mat and I really couldn't see it. But seeing it back on tape, like, all action, good heat, and just different, and they both got to show personalities. And I have to say, I like Rocky Romero as himself a lot better than I like him as Black Tiger. Um,
Yeah.
I feel like I would have, I mean, he will come back, to ROH, especially in '07, but, I would have liked to see more of this version of Rocky Romero during this era. Um, I'm really glad they eventually got to have a match on national television because I never would have guessed that. But
Yeah, and
yeah,
I do think like watching this match. I mean, he's not quite where he would end up being, but I would imagine you agree. Like he's 1 year later, he's showing a bunch more charisma than he did in his early Havana Pitbulls Ring of Honor performances, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, I mean, you were obviously the lowest of the low on the
yeah,
Havana Pitbulls stuff in ROH,
yeah,
but yes, I think together they showed less than they do individually, honestly. And
yeah. Honestly, this is
Romero obviously shows a lot more personality, but yeah, no, this was the first time you really saw that in ROH.
yeah, this is a good night for both of them. Yeah, that's actually
Yep.
didn't even think about combining them that way.
And just to note, Romero did have Ricky Reyes and Julius Smokes in his corner.
Yeah. So the other thing you mentioned that I think is a really good point, I'm glad you brought up, was I think this match, yeah, with the Gabe's commentary, it's another great example of something we've talked about before, which is Ring of Honor, like going the extra mile to like pick up threads and dot every I, and or not every I, but a lot more than a lot of promotions, because yeah, technically this match happens because the whole idea of the trios tournament is that each of the three people on the winning team, which would have been Homicide, Reyes, and Romero, get basically a chance to wrestle any match they want. It's not quite Money in the Bank where it can't be impromptu, but they basically got to book themselves. And so Homicide used his, I believe, to wrestle Aries at the Best of the American Super Juniors show for the world title. I believe Reyes used his to team with Homicide to wrestle Mamaluke and Renaro for the tag titles. And this is Romero's. And because Romero had New Japan commitments, he hasn't wrestled a lot this year for Ring of Honor. And I feel like a lot of promotions, they would just have forgotten that. But Ring of Honor, actually, they go out of their way to remember that. And I think they book it on a show because they know Romero and Danielson could not, like, draw on a show as one of the top matches. But they picked the show with Homicide and Carino and the big Steel Cage Warfare match. I feel like where you can have the world title match kind of be a step down in terms of like sexiness.
Yeah, it is weird that it was like a total mid-card match though. Like in the smack dab in the middle of the show, not even like second from the top. That is a little bit weird.
Yeah, even Joe and Lethal is above it for no title. Yeah, but I guess that would. But I did like you said, the Gabe commentary. I thought it did a good job of trying to like rationalize everything and give Romero a little bit of juice. And they even went, this is so adorable, I felt like during the intros they showed a clip of Rocky Romero being like the first person to attack Danielson at the end of Weekend of Thunder 2, night 2, where the Pitbulls turn on Danielson after the Liger and Joe versus Danielson and low-key match. And I just love that they went back to a 2-year-old match, or an old match.
Yeah, it was a year old. Yeah.
Yeah, a year old. Yeah. Just to get that, I mean, it's like no one's remembering that. No, it's not a major plot point, but
probably 2 years on our timeline, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I get confused. But just the fact that someone went in production and said, you know what, we'll get that clip. Like,
yes,
I like that. I like that little bit of detail there. And then also during the intros, Brian, this time, he has this new gimmick where he's getting Bobby Cruz to announce different things for him. He whispers in his ear before he announces Danielson in the ring introductions. And this time he got Bobby to announce him as the only real world champion in wrestling today. I forget who the other champions were in wrestling at this time, so I don't know how much of a sick burn this was, but that was a cute moment too. So after the match, Bryan Danielson celebrates in the ring when Lance Storm appears in the entranceway, starting to walk to the ring. He gets no music, and in fact, it feels like it takes the crowd a little bit of time to realize who he is, and you adding context that some of the fans couldn't even see what was going on. That also adds to it, because when you watch him come out, he does not get that immediate pop. It's like as he starts walking the ring and more people see him, then he gets the big pop, like, oh shit, it's Lance Storm.
And it becomes a huge pop. And I realize, like, wow, Ring of Honor fans love the Impact players.
Yeah, like it's not quite a just incredible pop, but Matt,
It's
could you
close,
imagine
no,
the
no, but it is close because when I was first watching, I was like, this isn't the Just Incredible pop. But then as it grew, I'm like, oh, you know what? It's not that far off.
there probably is, as weird as the sounds, the people that have not been following every Ring of Honor show and following like the saga of Just Incredible's incredible pop for his debut in Ring of Honor, but there probably was, I don't know if money is the right word, but probably would have been something worth like booking one Impact Players match in Ring of Honor.
Yeah, no,
Especially for like,
they both got huge pops, like two of the bigger pops in ROH history, I would say, for their entrances.
yeah. So Lance comes to the ring. He gets a very nice reaction once everyone realizes, hey, this is Lance Storm. He's here. Lance grabs the mic and does the old, if I can be serious for a minute, gets a nice pop for that. Lance says he's here out of respect. He respects Bryan Danielson. He saw the match where Bryan won the title, and he wanted to see Bryan work live. And then his mic isn't working particularly well, and then he just keeps deadpans and goes, I want this microphone to work. Storm then says he retired when he retired, he was asked why, and he's never really given a straight answer. But the reason is he wasn't allowed to have the kind of matches that he was proud of anymore. So he knows where Danielson's coming from with all his recent comments about corporate wrestling, stuff like that. Lance goes, then at ECW One Night Stand, I was allowed to go out having one more match on my terms, with my old partner, my old friend, Chris Jericho. It was a match I could be proud of. And he says, not once since that match have I reconsidered my decision or reconsidered returning since then, but watching Danielson tonight reminded him why he loves this business, and if he ever decides to give up that one last match that he had with Jericho for another match, it would be with a guy like Bryan Danielson. Lance then extends his hand for a handshake as the fans chant one more match. At this point, Bryan snatches the mic away. He says he doesn't do anything on the other people's terms, not these jackass fans, and he doesn't let corporate America tell him how to wrestle like some people he knows. Bryan says he won't shake Lance's hand on his terms, but as a professional wrestler who respects those who came before him, who respects the contributions Lance made, Bryan credits Lance for opening the door for smaller guys like himself. Bryan wants to shake Lance's hands on his own terms, getting the fans to cheer Lance first. Bryan then thanks Lance, and then they shake hands. Storm poses on the turnbuckles as an ad for Ring of Honor's new Lance Storm shoot interview scrolls across the screen. Bryan leaves to let Lance receive his ovation, and he gets another one more match chant. The Lance Storm stuff was good. One thing I thought the Bryan Danielson thing was kind of weird because it felt like we've talked about before how in Ring of Honor so often every character has like a one sentence like character development. Like the Carnage Crew was, we hate our wives and our kids and we like fighting, and they would just repeat that ad nauseum. And I felt like the line Danielson was given to deliver at this point in Ring of Honor was always, I don't let anyone tell me how I wrestle, and I don't let corporate America tell me how to wrestle. And so to really emphasize it, it felt like they told him, like, let Lance know, you're not going to do things on his terms. But then Bryan Danielson's terms here for having a handshake with Lance Storm was basically, I want to tell you some more about how cool you are, and then we can shake on my terms. It was
the term was that he wanted everyone to stand up and clap for him to do it. That was what it was.
It was weird though, because he's still doing that kind of heelish, like this era of Danielson energy, but it was a very nice thing he did. Like it was, yeah. I thought that was kind of weird.
But it was weird. But I think they knew that. Like I think it was like they were teasing it. They were teasing tension. But then he was like, "Actually, I'm going to honor and respect you." Like, but I'm still a dick. You know what I mean? Like that's why Danielson's not a total heel because he's a jerk. But he still has honor, I guess, is like the idea, which is what they were trying to go with for CM Punk in his early run, right? That he's still honorable. But I was like, but CM Punk cheats all the time in that era. So, but for Danielson, it actually makes sense that like he is a jerk with honor.
So, Dave Meltzer, I thought this was interesting, The Observer. I want your thought on this, Matt. Dave wrote, Lance Storm legitimately was talked with about doing a match with Bryan Danielson, but Storm said he considers himself retired, so at this point there are no plans. Now, I guess there is a possible universe where on this day, because again, the point of Lance Storm being in this area was he was doing a straight shoot interview, as Eric told us in the email. They filmed it actually after the show, and Lance sat emotionless, any kind of istless you can think of, waiting for it to happen. But it is. I guess it's possible they tried to talk him to it, and he didn't want to commit at this moment. But knowing that they actually wrestled just a few months later in Ring of Honor, and they don't like tease it in the sense of there's no angle. You know, Lance Storm doesn't even say I want to wrestle you if I come out of retirement. He says someone like you. But I mean, I really do think probably someone was just kayfabing Dave here because I mean, if you actually see this segment, it definitely feels like they're pushing towards Danielson Storm.
I actually believe the story. Cause I remember just hearing Storm kind of say in the years later, like just seeing Danielson and like seeing him in person is sort of like what got him interested in doing the match. And this is the moment that he did it. So I don't think he's going to see the match and like decide right then and there. I think they were trying to sell him on it. And that's why Storm was like, you know, maybe I'll do it. But like, I think like the idea was in his mind. I'm sure the seed was already planted, but I do not believe the match was on the books yet. And certainly not where the match would happen. I actually do believe that. I think maybe it was a little bit undersold in the Observer in the sense of like, they're trying to get him to do a match soon, you know, with Danielson. I think that's true. And they were acting more like Storm is like, you know, forget it, I'm retired. And they were clearly like kind of working him to get to that point.
Yeah.
But I believe that it was not a settled thing yet. I do believe that. I mean, look at Steve Austin at WrestleMania this year. Like, he didn't announce that he was going to have a match, which makes no sense. But I guess the idea is like he just wasn't sure yet and didn't want to false advertise, right? So, I'm sure that's what was going on with Storm too.
And for those who are thinking, well, I mean, clearly this had to have been like as a point in your favor, Matt. If people were thinking like clearly, like the fact that Lance shows up, this had to be a setup. Well, no, because Ring of Honor, we've seen this multiple times now. They would like bring a guy in just to do a shoot interview on the day of a Ring of Honor show, and then they would also go, well, hey, while you're doing a shoot interview, would you like to show up and just make an appearance? And
they should have done Bryan Danielson versus Bill Watts.
I was about to say with the Bill Watts thing, yeah. So like, you know, it could have been just literally like, hey, we're booking you for a shoot interview, and would you like to come out, you know, and put over our champ? And
this sure went better than Shane Douglas's appearance in New York did.
Yeah, but let's face it, Matt, it would have been great if Lance Storm had to answer a cell phone during this. But Dave also had a comment about the match itself. He didn't see the match at this point, but he wrote, Bryan Danielson kept the Ring of Honor title over Rocky Romero without the Black Tiger mask, using the half crab in 15 minutes, 30 seconds. And Dave wrote, actually, I like the idea of them doing a sub 20-minute title match because it was becoming like the All Japan pattern in the 90s where everyone knows the title match has to go 25 minutes or more, and so no moves get over until the 20-minute mark. The storyline seems to be that Danielson uses a new submission hold to win every time out, but because of that, the moves aren't signature moves, so the people aren't primed for it as the finish. And I think Dave has a good point about, like, it is good to vary your match times because you have Danielson. I mean, I think his shortest match as champion before this was probably the Carino match, which I think was still significantly over 20 minutes.
Unless you count the Azrael match.
Oh, yeah, the Azrael match, of course. Yeah, you're right. But other than that, like, you know, even the match he won with Gibson, very long. The Daniels match was half an hour. The Roderick Strong matches were both over half an hour. The Sabin match was, I think, approaching half an hour. Like, so yeah, that's one of the reasons I found this match refreshing was if you haven't been watching all of Danielson's things, you're like, oh, Danielson and Rocky Romero had a 15-minute match. Like, what's the big deal? But it is refreshing in the sense of it's a switch from what you've been seeing if you've been watching every show.
Yeah, and it's also funny that he's mentioning another thing that he could have written today about Bryan Danielson.
Exactly, yeah.
He's winning with different, but the difference is I think no one would criticize it now because I think years later it's like, oh, this is just really cool that he's doing this. No one's like, oh man, Danielson's not getting any of these moves over, you know?
Oh, another thing I want to mention, this is the most important thing, Matt. The great moment where Danielson goes for a handshake, Romero spits in Danielson's hand, and then Danielson walks over to a cameraman
about that. Yes,
and
great.
Wipes it on the cameraman.
Yes.
You know, Matt, nothing else sells Bryan Danielson as a tweener as that moment where he's not the one doing the spin in the hand, but he's also going to wipe it off on somebody else. That's the true tweener, Matt.
That's the anti-Jimmy Miranda award. You're literally spitting on the crew.
If Ring of Honor had the equivalent of a Jimmy Miranda award, that'd be a story that guy could tell when he won the award. Like, yeah. I remember where I took one for the team.
Shane Hagedorn might correct me on this, but I'm pretty sure that camera guy's name is Jimmy. I'm not joking.
I know, it all comes full circle.
So many
And we
Jimmys in ROH.
Um, cut to Jack Evans backstage. Would have been great if this was a Jimmy, like Jimmy Jacobs promo or something. Jack says Ring of Honor has the audacity to put him, Jack Evans, in a cage. He doesn't know why Ring of Honor would do that to the embassy. He says a cage is his own and is his environment, and you do not put a pit bull in another pit bull's backyard and expect him to win. Which, that's one of those lines where, like, it sounds, until you think about, like interesting or profound, but it's like, I don't know, I'm sure I could find, like, a pit bull that's, like, tougher than another pit bull, and even if it was in that other pit bull's backyard, like, he could win. Like, Matt, if someone comes to my house, there are plenty of people that could beat me up in my own house. Like,
Trevor,
my home field advantage is not that big of an advantage.
Trevor, I don't want to hear you endorsing dog fighting.
No,
I'm against it.
not. No.
I'm going to take a stand on this one, Trevor.
The boldest stand on this episode.
But CM Punk did that same concept when he did his Joe versus Punk 2 promo, where he said, when the bullies came to his house, he won the fight because he was in his own house. And yes, I agree with you. Like I would lose almost every fight in my own house.
Yeah, like there is not much I can do in my house that I can't do in your house in the context of a fight.
Unless I saw it coming and booby-trapped it a la Home Alone. Then I feel like I would have the real advantage.
I mean, the best advantage I have is I can run to the bathroom very quickly because I know where it is and lock myself in there. Like, that's my advantage in a fight. That's my home field advantage.
What do you think of booby traps, though? That could be a fun project.
It's a fun project.
I don't know, Trevor. You have some people that want to come and beat you up. You could probably just booby trap the house. I think you should do it now. Preemptively booby trap your house. I think it's a good idea.
It's been a weird 3 weeks. So anyway, Jack is here to prove that he's a mainstay in Ring of Honor. And that's about it for this promo. I wrote, not a great promo delivery from Jack, kind of fumbling for his words briefly at a couple points, and the seriousness doesn't fit well on him here, but again, I appreciate that everyone gets their promo time to set up like how big the main event is. And then next, we get, I think, the guy who did the best on these promos on this night from these two factions, and that's Alex Shelley. Alex Shelley just, a short, nothing special, but fine promo here where he goes, he says this all began a year ago when Austin Aries usurped him as leader of Generation Next. Shelley says, you bring your diet Generation Next, your watered down group, because it's not the same without Alex Shelley. Shelley says he's going to personally make sure that the personal Jesus is crucified tonight. Thank God he did not say this on like Easter weekend, Matt. If we've learned anything from the time we're calling this show, people do not like your religious symbolism during the week of Easter. Now,
I ain't saying shit about this one.
Yeah, even I have not made a tweet about that. I've learned my lesson, Matt.
Yes.
But
I'm skeptical that you've learned your lesson, but hey, a short reprieve.
I've learned some lessons, not all the lessons.
Yes.
But that brings us to Jay Lethal defeats Samoa Joe via pinfall in 20 minutes, 42 seconds after he hit the Dragon Suplex. Matt, this is a big storyline development, at least. This is not the first time we've seen Lethal and Joe wrestle, but the Jay Lethal done turned heel in this match, Matt. What'd you think about everything related to this match?
I think this match is fairly famously disappointing, and I think I can explain at least part of the reasons why. The first little bit of it is just a lot of like feeling out process, and Joe hits some of his signature combos, but they're not doing anything super dynamic. At one point very early in the match, Joe does this pretty cool stretch where he lifts Lethal off the mat while grabbing his arm, almost like embarrassing Lethal early. He does that other thing where he just like, the thing where he does where he walks away when someone goes for a crossbody off the ropes and he just like casually walks away, which again, embarrasses Lethal. But, once the heel turn comes, which is basically Lethal. So like Joe does the face wash, and he's really aggressive with the face wash. Like he does it a lot, and then so Lethal moves out of the way of the running boot, and then he pulls Joe out of the ring, wraps his leg around the ring post, and then he does this thing where he's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. That was too much, and he acts like he won't do it again. But then instead he gets a chair and starts wailing away at Joe's knee with the chair. And then Gabe, of course, acts shocked, and then Lethal hits him more in the leg, like almost like Austin at WrestleMania 17 style, just like over and over and over again. And, the crowd does get into it. They start chanting, fuck you, Lethal. But you might think, oh, so that's the end of the match. Lethal is disqualified, right? I mean, that's what makes sense right there,
Yeah.
right? But instead, he beats the shit out of Joe's leg with a chair, and then the match just keeps going for a while. And then they just go
For
back
like
and,
another 7 minutes, I think.
yeah, they just go back in and like Lethal just like beats on Joe's leg, and the crowd is just like quiet at that point because it's just like you have this big climactic heel turn, and it's just like then you just do more of a match, and Lethal's like working over. It's funny because like at one point Lethal drops Joe's leg over the bottom rope and like ties it up, and the ref counts till 5 for the rope break, and I'm like, so you're doing disqualifications, but not for the thing where you're beating the shit out of him with a chair. I mean, I know this has been a pet peeve of mine for a long time, but this is by far the most egregious example of this. Um, and, Gabe is like, oh, Lethal's not sure of what he's doing. He's like, he's suddenly become possessed, and like Lethal is kicking away at Joe's leg. And he's like, teach me, teacher, where's my pure title? Like, so, he's making it very clear why he's turned. There's not a lot of question about what was the motivation here. But I'm just like, why doesn't he just use the chair some more, since apparently he's allowed to do it? And so the crowd is just confused. I feel like they get to this climactic moment, and they should have just like either had the disqualification there or waited until the last second for Lethal to turn and then win that way, because they belabor it, and it just gets weird. Like there is some cool stuff, like Lethal doing Joe going for the Death Valley driver, but his leg buckles. Lethal hits the headbutt to the back of Joe's leg and turns it into a half crab. And, Joe can't even run the rope. So there is good selling. Joe buckles again on the muscle buster, and then Lethal hits the dragon suplex, and a good one for the win. So it's not like the match was bad. Like, there was good stuff, but I think just the way they paced it, it was just a weirdly done heel turn. And I think it could have been done much more effectively. And I just really hate that they do the thing where you could just randomly beat the shit out of somebody with a chair, and it is not a problem at all. But you get counted for not breaking on the rope break. Like, that's just too weird to me. I just can't get past that.
Yeah. It's funny because a lot of times I feel like we talk about like, oh, this match didn't have a story, and that's a negative. And sometimes a match doesn't have a story, but we really like the match because the moves are so cool. I feel like this is a match that has a story, but it's kind of like the story isn't really well told, and they don't really tell it for more than like a third of the match, because I agree with basically everything you say. Like, there's a million ways to do a heel turn in a match, but I feel like a couple of the most standard ways are you could do kind of like the progressive burn, where all during the match, like one guy's getting more frustrated with the other guy, like he's getting out wrestled, or the other guy's kind of patronizing him, and he finally just snaps. Or you can do like the shocking right at the very end, guy does one nefarious thing and immediately wins the match, and it's just like this huge shock. And as you were talked about, they kind of don't like, they do a tiny bit of the first part where like you mentioned a couple spots where like, Joe at one point's like trying to get Lethal up to his feet in kind of just like a normal way after a move, but like not very roughly. And Lethal kind of angrily shoves him away, like almost like he's being patronized. And that stuff would have been neat if they did a lot of that and to set up a turn. But instead, there's like no slow burn here. It's just like they're wrestling a very regular kind of nothing particularly special match. And then Lethal isn't like badly losing the match, really. It's back and forth. And then he just gets to a point where he's like, yeah, I'm going to use this chair and I'm going to start hitting it. And then at that point, from that point on, like you mentioned, instead of having like a shocking turn where Jay Lethal uses a chair and immediately wins, we get, I think I counted it like 7 minutes of a match where it's kind of interesting because it's Joe in a way you rarely see him, where he's the underdog now and he's selling, and you mentioned all the spots where his leg gives out, but like it just goes on. And even there, Lethal, he's trying to be a heel, but it's very sporadic. Like most of the match, most of the last 7 minutes, he's still wrestling kind of emotionless, just regular with not a lot of like venom to him. He's working over the leg a bit. And then once in a while he'll remember like, oh, I'm a heel. And he'll say something like you mentioned, like, teach me, teacher, or, remember you took my pure title, stuff like that. But really, he doesn't have the emotional chops, again, at this point. He's only 20 to carry a moment like this. And the booking of this, I just feel like you should have either built up to it more or made it very sudden right at the very end. Instead, you kind of get like the worst. You get neither of the good worlds there. And the chair thing, it did not bug me as much as it bothered you, because I kind of feel like it's become unofficial Ring of Honor canon, even though I think it's very stupid that just if you use a foreign object outside the ring, somehow that's okay. Like, I feel like that's stupid, but I feel like we've seen that enough where it almost feels like, oh, if you don't use the chair in the ring, somehow that's okay. And it's dumb, but it happens. The one thing I didn't like about the chair, one thing I didn't like about the chair thing I thought was funny, which was we've praised Gabe, like we saw a few times on the show, like the good parts of Gabe on commentary where he can really explain things and give insight. I think we saw like the old bad part of Gabe here, where at one point where Lethal starts slamming Joe's leg into the ring post, Gabe like gets really like hot, like, that had to be out of instinct. I don't think he meant to do that. Like, he's trying to act like Lethal is crossing the line, just slamming Joe's leg into the ring post, which is like a somewhat aggressive thing, but it's not particularly, I would say, heelish or over the line. But it's just because it's Gabe doing his classic telegraphing where he knows the next spot is Lethal crossing the line. It's grabbing the chair. And I just thought it was one of those things again where you didn't need to sell him ramming a guy's leg into a turnbuckle as like, oh my God, it must have been an accident. Like, what? You know, when you accidentally slam someone's leg into a turnbuckle. But yeah, I would say, like, you know, there's enough interesting stuff in this match to give it, like, it's a decent match. It's just very disappointing, and the story is very not optimally told. Not even close, I would say.
And in the end, this doesn't really work out, right? Like, Lethal's not long for Ring of Honor. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, maybe it would have gotten over better if it was executed better. I mean, I do think it makes sense, like, logically, like, I don't think it's a bad idea to have Lethal turn on Joe at this point. I think it is a reasonably logical step for his character. I just think, you know, so I'm not against the idea necessarily. It just wasn't executed well. You know, it happens. It happens sometimes.
So we actually have a note from the Observer about the reasoning behind that. First off, Dave wrote, based on the live reports, strong match, which again, someone clearly who wrote a report liked it, but I think our thoughts are kind of like the general consensus nowadays on this match. Dave then continued, Lethal was given a tryout as a heel on some FIP shows, and Gabe Sapolsky thought he was better that way, plus felt they had taken the teacher-protege thing with Joe about as far as they could. Which, I mean, I can't argue with that reasoning. I kind of agree with the Joe J protege. Unless you were going to make them tag champs, which they clearly weren't. Like, I do feel like that story kind of probably gone as long as it could.
Did Lethal and Joe ever feud or do anything in TNA together?
I'm not sure.
Because if not, it's pretty crazy that they're just like, all right, well, here's the next phase of the feud. 17 years later in AEW. As the main event.
It's also like there were, like, this match, I will say, speaking of the match quality, like, I don't think it was a very good match, but there was enough where I would almost give this like 3 stars. But there was, even in the wrestling part of this match, there was a couple off moments. Like, there's a weird spot where Jay does a side Russian leg sweep, but he turns forward as Joe drops, and it looks so awful but so weird that I can't decide if it was meant to be a move that was purposely looked like that or something weird happened. And, like, that's never a good sign where I can't tell if something was done on purpose or not. And then also, I felt bad for them because a spot near the end of the match would have been really cool. It would have been the spot of the match where Jay Lethal springboards off the top rope, and Joe is supposed to catch him and do like the Uranagi that he usually does when a guy runs at him in the corner, and he just grabs him with the one arm and like slams him down. And Jay was supposed to grab like Jay out of midair as he springboards and does it. And it's a very ambitious spot to try, and they do not pull it off. Like, Jay, they can't kind of sync up on the arm, and so Joe makes up for it. You could always, it's always weird when you see this in wrestling where you can tell when a move gets botched where the guy's like, I'm just going to kill this guy to make up for it, because Joe immediately just grabs Lethal and like drops him with like a brutal looking German suplex. I felt so bad for Jay Lethal because that probably was not in the plans, and Joe was probably like, fuck, you know, we got to do something, and so he just German suplexes the hell out of Jay Lethal. So I felt bad for him there. But yeah, sometimes things just don't work out. But After the match, Lethal shakes Joe's limp hand as Joe is still selling on the mat. He goes to leave, but then he thinks better of it. He turns around and he starts kicking and stomping Joe's legs some more. And like you said earlier, man, I guess we should emphasize too, as badly as not greatly as this angle turned out, and how we don't think it was turned out really great. Like you mentioned, like when Lethal initially turns in this match, it does get a good reaction. Like I think people were receptive to the idea of Jay Lethal turning heel on Samoa Joe. It's just the execution doesn't work out great, and Jay goes to TNA fall time and all of that. And then we finally, as Jay leaves, we get like a moment of Joe really staring super angrily as he starts to recover in the ring and just like letting you know it's on. And that's that. So that brings us to the semi-main event, a rematch of the 2003 consensus pick for Through the Years' Ring of Honor Match of the Year for 2003. Steve Corino defeated Homicide, scored to the ring by Julius Smokes, via pinfall in 16 minutes, 28 seconds after a masked Colt Cabana hit Homicide with a lariat. So, first off, before the match, Corino's personal ring announcer, Brian Regal, reads a long intro. This time, instead of like a list like he's normally been doing, it's a poem. I could not work out most of it. God bless the people at an Honorable Mention podcast. Jeff Schwartz transcribed and reads off the entire thing. So if you want to hear the poem, listen to them. There are some funny lines. I do not think it was one of the best Steve Corino ring introductions. It is also kind of weird to see it, something that's so humorous before like a hated feud.
It was one of my least favorite Corino ring introductions. And I'm just so you know, I couldn't hear what he was saying live. I was like, what the hell is he saying? And then I really, even on video, I really couldn't make out what he was saying. But the lines that I did hear were, not, in my opinion, not very good.
Yeah, I could make out a line here. They're like, the notorious 187 in a couple of years will be mopping up a 7-Eleven. Like, those are the kind of lines you're getting in this poem.
Yeah, not very good. It was called the War Round 4, though.
Yeah, which I do like, the trying to make it seem epic, like that part of it, like an Ali Frazier type thing.
Also, it made clear that they were going to be heels in this match because, Homicide's usually the heel, and Corino wasn't a heel when he teamed with Cabana a few months earlier, but now he's going to be a heel because they're in New York and they're going to lean into Homicide being the babyface.
Yeah, and the crowd actually chants not shut the fuck up, but boring during this intro, so maybe some of the crowd agreed too.
Yes.
So this is one of those matches, Matt. Oh, and I should also say, before I describe the match, because there's a whole sorts of plunder and stuff, Gabe does explain this match that Jim Cornette has said in this match that because of the hated feud and all that, the hate-filled feud, that like Jim Cornette has instructed the referee to let everything go except outside interference, which happens multiple times in this match, which we'll get to. But so this is one of those matches, Matt. I've talked about this before. It's hard. I hate talking about these kind of matches because I'm going to give thoughts about how this match is as a piece of entertainment, because that's all we can do as fans and people that do a podcast that review shows. But I always feel bad when a big injury happens early on in a match and clearly affects the match. And so, because it's like weird to criticize something where someone's working through something really serious. It's not on them. And, but I do feel in this match, there's so much of it seemed like they had a lot of pre-planned stuff that happened. And I feel like watching this match, I realized this match was hurt by the injury, which I'll describe in a second. But I also feel like watching this match, I got the impression that if they did the match that they had planned, I still don't think I wouldn't have loved this match. But, so basically the story of this match is very early on, within the first opening minutes. Homicide does his tope con heel, the move we've seen him do a million times, one of the great tope con heels in the biz. And he flies high. I would say the difference, there's some controversy I have a bunch of notes on afterwards, but, Homicide feels that Corino did not protect him at certain moments in this match, including this. He kind of blames him for this. I would say I watched this a few times, like the goddamn Zapruder film, because of those comments. I would say on this Tope con hilo, I would not blame Corino, because if you look, Corino is standing fairly close to the ring, and maybe closer than opponents usually do. And Homicide comes in high and flies basically over Corino's head. And you can see Corino gets one arm. He's trying to get a hand on Homicide, but Homicide's just above his head. And instead of really hitting Corino in the head and chest, he flies over and he turns enough that he lands on his shoulder and completely fucks up his shoulder. Like later in the match, we see a close up of his shoulder, and it seems to be like pointing out at a weird angle with weird divots in the skin, and the commentary's like, oh my god. And I watched even a shoot interview that Homicide did in like early 2007, and he even then at one point talking about this points to his shoulder, like, look how bad my shoulder is still. Like, he's still saying my shoulder's fucked up. You know, this was an injury that I think would haunt Homicide for basically the rest of his career to this day, and probably in some respects. And I believe they said it was an injury where it was like a badly bruised like AC joint or something. Like, it wasn't, it was really badly hurt, but not necessarily torn. So anyway, the whole rest of this match, Homicide is clearly really hurt. He is constantly checking on his shoulder. He is at points, some points he's using both arms. At some points he's just using the one good arm. He's letting the other one kind of hang limply. He's really clearly in pain. There is a couple moments where Carino stomps Homicide's shoulder, and you can see Homicide get mad and actually talk to him and swear him, like, don't fucking do that to me. Like, don't hit my shoulder. You know, I feel bad. He wrestled almost this entire match gutting this out, and I feel bad for that. But then there's the rest of the match, and they have a lot of pre-planned spots. And so what I would say about this match is I think a big part of what makes the Bitter Friends Stiffer Enemies match so great, that made it our 2003 match of the year, is that it had some weapons in it and some gore, but it didn't feel like that was the star of the show. I felt like Carino and Homicide's hate was the story, and the props was like a supporting player. Here, it feels like the props and the booking is like the star of the show, and the hate is secondary. Even though there is hate in this, we get like a barbed wire chair, a regular chairs, a table spot, a barricade spot, a fork spots, fork to the ear on Carino, where Carino blades or gets cut from the ear, multiple run-ins from Colt Cabana, a ref bump, the ref blades. Like, this match is all bells and whistles to the point where it starts feeling more like a more violent, like, Attitude Era WWF pay-per-view main event during like the Russo era than like a really good hate-filled feud match. And then another thing I would say that the Bitter Friends match was really good about was its pace. It had this really great methodical pace where it was methodical enough that everything really had weight to it, but you never just felt like you were sitting around so a guy could set up a prop. That's unfortunately not the case here, and part of that's probably because, again, Homicide's hurt. But there is a moment in this match where Carino takes like for freaking ever to bring out a Ring of Honor barricade, one of those sheet metal signs, out from under the ring, set up on 4 chairs in the ring, only so Homicide can eventually recover and slam Carino off the top rope onto it. And
and just so you know, not to interrupt, but that took a long time, clearly because it was Homicide that was supposed to do that, and he just couldn't because of his shoulder.
Yeah. And Carino, like, takes kind of a gnarly bump off it. Like, he almost lands on his shoulder and head from it. But, like, as far as props go, it's like it's such a letdown for all the time it took them to set it up, because, like, it's just a thin piece of sheet metal, and, like, the chairs like shoot out from under them. It seems like a relatively like safe spot, and granted, in the way that's good, but in a match where like there's fork to the ears and ace crusher through a table and barbed wire chairs and all this stuff, it was a long setup for one of the tamer weapon spots in the match. It was just one of those things where it was like another dock against. And then finally, Matt, before I give it to you, I think the other big negative of this match is the overbooking, where yes, they're using it to put over the Colt Cabana thing, but in a match where Jim Cornette multiple times stresses like no outside interference, you know, in this promo, and then Gabe reminding us on commentary, to have Cabana wear a mask and interfere not once but twice, including to set up the finish, like the finish directly comes from Colt, you know, lariating Homicide. And I get it's probably to protect Homicide and to keep the Colt feud hot and all that stuff, but again, it's one of those things that make it feel more like a WWF match in the bad ways, and kind of cheapens, you know, something special these guys had in their last couple matches. And it's just weird they put such an emphasis on, you know, no interference, and then interference is like a central point of the match. So despite all of that, here's the weird thing. I would say they worked hard. There was a lot of violence and blood and body sacrifice in this match. I would say it's slightly above average as a match. It's not close to their Bitter Friends, Stiffer Enemies match, or even their War of the Wire barbed wire match. But I would say, like knowing the story, which I'll get to some more of the details afterwards, and just their history, I was fascinated minute to minute by this match. But I feel like if you don't know that history, it'll just be kind of a somewhat like weapons match. But knowing everything about this, like I was like entertained minute to minute.
Yeah, I mean, crazy thing. I don't know. Maybe you'll think I'm nuts, but like, I like this match way, 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 way more than I remembered.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying it was a great match. Like, it definitely was worse than the 2003 matches, the two big ones anyway. But like, it was such a spectacle. Like, for whatever it was, and obviously it was horrible seeing Homicide's injury and like, but like considering that happened, like the match was super like crazy and memorable. And I think part of it was that it had really good crowd heat. And nothing to me in wrestling is sadder than guys like brutalizing each other and themselves to a dead crowd. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And this one, they were brutalizing themselves and each other, but at least the crowd was reacting. And there was some brutal stuff. I mean, Carino's ear, like it looked like a piece of tortellini covered in tomato sauce. Like that's
making me hungry, man.
Yes, don't eat Carino's ear. Don't make him Mick Foley just because you were hungry.
Next time I have tortellini, I'm going to call it Carino's ears. I made a bunch of Carino's ears tonight, and people are going to think, "Oh, is that a really fancy Italian passage?"
Yeah, but like they were just like, we're going to brutalize each other, and yes, it was convoluted, and yes, it was a lot of like, I don't really know if it was attitude. I feel like it was more like ECW more than like attitude era WWF. Like it was just like people are just like in their, and in fact, at one point, Prazak says Carino is lying in a quote bloody pool of his own blood. It's like, that's a good adjective to describe a pool of blood. But like, they're like chucking chairs at each other's head, which, we've established is horrible, but we've accepted this is a thing they did back then. They did do your favorite spot, the Ace Crusher through the table.
Yeah, again. But, again, I can't, it always gets over.
Yeah.
Even though it's the guy doing it that always takes the entire bump. But
hey, especially poor Homicide here, since he already had the messed up shoulder.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, you could tell, like, especially in the minutes after the injury, like Homicide's face is like not just like in pain, like trying to grimace through the pain, but also like kind of like worried, like, oh shit, I can't move my arm. Yeah. By late in the match, he's sort of like just gotten his like mojo back, and he's just like being himself and like just fighting through the pain. But like, like I thought like, Keener blading was like pretty entertaining. I agree with you that the ending was bad. Like just especially, not just like because of like the storyline, but also just after all that punishment, Cabana just hits a clothesline and Homicide gets pinned. The other thing is, Cabana's first appearance is him taking out Smokes with a pipe. And I thought, like, this match Homicide really could have used Smokes during this match. Like, this is the worst possible match to have Smokes not there, because, like, Smokes could have helped him set up some of the props. Smokes could have, like, taken cover for him and, like, you know what I mean, while he was convalescing. Like,
he could have just... Yeah, like taking so much of the attention and like in a good way. Sometimes we like Smokes, but occasionally we go, he takes too much of the attention. This is a time where he desperately needed. And that's a great point. Like it's the one match he doesn't have him. Yeah, Cabana takes him out early with a pipe.
Exactly. And the other thing is, Gabe goes after he takes out the pipe. He's like, maybe it's the person who took out Nancy Kerrigan, which I was like, that's a dated reference, even in 2005. If anything, it might be more relevant now because of the I, Tonya movie that came out a few years ago.
If he wanted to make it a wrestling reference, he could have done, that's the Butcher. Is that the Butcher? Because, Beefcake in WCW, they famously did the Nancy Kerrigan thing when it was more timely, where they had Brutus Beefcake during I believe, a Clash of the Champions take out Hogan, and they basically did the Nancy Kerrigan, like, why me, note for note thing.
That's right. But that was like the same year.
Yeah.
That was like a few months after the actual event, not 11
more
and
than
a half years later. Yeah.
I wonder, like, Matt, do you think, like, occasionally we have a listener that, like, did not grow up with Ring of Honor. Do you think, like, anyone that's, like, 20 years old today, if they hear that reference, will they even know, like, is it famous enough that people will know it that didn't live through it, won't even know who Nancy Kerrigan is, do you think?
Yeah, because of I, Tonya.
Oh, yeah, I completely forgot about, like, you just mentioned, I, Tonya. Yeah. I never saw I, Tonya, so it just keeps flying out of one ear out of the other, but, the kids love I, Tonya.
That's true. It's the hottest thing among the young people. It's been like 4 years, but everyone's still talking about it.
So yeah, you like the match more. I mean,
I just thought it was an incredible spectacle. That's like it just like it was not like it wasn't on the level of the great matches that they had. Like, and I'm not saying it's a great match. Like, it's just like it was spectacular, like in the literal sense of the word. Like, it was just such a crazy thing, and they were really brutalizing each other, and the crowd loved it. And so I was too far away live to see it and enjoy it, like, I guess. But on video, it was just like, oh, this is quite the thing. I mean, you agree. I mean, clearly from your review, you agree with that. It was quite the thing.
Again, I was entertained every single minute. But again, part of me, I don't know how much of it is because I'm kind of so invested in this promotion and these wrestlers and the story of their careers. But like, and I knew how badly that it was a real injury. And I know, Matt, do you know it's not even the only injury Homicide suffers in this match?
Yeah, I don't really remember, but I do know that. Yeah.
So, yeah, I did a bunch of research on this. So let me see if I can find it here. We'll get to it. First off, I want to, Matt, sometimes on the show we do the classic Trevor Dame food analogies, and I think one of the last times I did it, you were like disappointed that I did not do. I keep doing them with meat, and so you can't relate as a vegetarian. Matt, I literally in my head like a week ago when I came up with this one, made it just regular pizza, so you can enjoy it as much as everybody else.
Yay.
So this is my thing with this match, I would say. And I think this is not just this match, but a lot of wrestling in general. Because I think one thing wrestling does sometimes and again, I agree with you. It was a spectacle. It was really entertaining for what it was. But as a match, it's a far cry from a match I absolutely love in that 2003 match. But I'll say this. So something wrestling does a lot, I think, is people really love a match. And wrestlers will go, well, God, we got to top it because there's always rematches. How do we top it? And they'll just go, well, what were people's favorite part of the match? And we'll just do more of that next time. And so, like, for example, my favorite wrestling of all time is probably still 90s All Japan men's wrestling. And something I didn't like and some people really liked is as they got into the late 90s into Pro Wrestling Noah, like those matches, what made them great was so many things. There was great selling and storytelling and nods to past matches and just epics. But two other things that were really good in those matches was they had really crazy head drops, which people loved, and they had these long sections of near falls, dramatic near falls at the end of the matches. And as the years came, All Japan decided how do we top these matches, these great matches? And they just started to do more and more near falls and more head drops. And to some people, that just kept getting better and better. To me, it got to the point where I was like, you're kind of getting away from like the balance of why I like this. And I kind of felt like this match was kind of like, again, it's hard to judge completely because of the injury, but it felt like it was people going, well, how do we top those matches people loved so much a couple of years ago? And it was just like, more weapons, more props, like run-ins, like let's throw every bell and whistle. And like the blood and the violence and the weapons, those were great parts of those matches. But it's got to the point where I just kind of felt like they were starting to dominate this match. And the way I would put Matt, here's where the food analogy comes in. If I cooked you a delicious pizza and you loved it, just a great cheese sauce crust, no meat, just a perfect balance, a classic Neapolitan pizza, and you love it. And I go, Matt, did you love the pizza? You go, yes. And I go, I'll make you another one tomorrow. And I go, Matt, I'll tell you what. Why don't you tell me what your favorite part of the pizza was? And you say, Trevor, it was all great, but the sauce is the best part. You have a way with the tomato, Matt, Trevor. It's like, I love it on the crust. I love it on Carino's ears. I love it everywhere. and I go, you'll come back tomorrow. I'm going to make you an even better pizza. And then you come back tomorrow and I make you the same pizza, except I have put 4 times as much sauce on it. Now, technically, you would probably say that's not as good of a pizza, but I could say to you, I took a pizza you loved, I took a thing you loved, and I gave you 4 times as much of your favorite part of it. But you would rightfully say, well, it's all out of balance now. Like, yes, my sauce is my favorite part, but now it's swimming in sauce. It's the part of what makes the pizza great is everything's in proportion. It's the crust and the sauce and the tomato. And I feel like sometimes in wrestling, Matt, what wrestlers do and what I think like Carino Homicide did here is they just said, here's way more tomato sauce. Like, that's what we can do.
I mean, we already established that is exactly what they did.
Exactly. I mean, and in a way, it can be impressive to see that much tomato sauce, Matt. But yes. I kind of wish there was more crust and cheese here.
I understand completely. Can I just do as a side thing to what you're because since you mentioned, I mean, this is completely a tangent, but since you mentioned the 90s All Japan, I remember. Tell me if this rings true to you. Like I remember, I got a compilation of Misawa Kobashi matches. I don't know, 20 years ago, really long time ago. And they had that amazing match in January of '97, one of the best matches ever, right?
Yeah.
Those two. And then I remember seeing a match they had maybe like October '98. And I still to this day, I'm like, I don't know if I've ever seen a match that went as excessive with the 2 counts as that Misawa Kobashi match did. Like, so you could just really see from like one match to another how much they really leaned into those insane near falls.
Yeah, I mean, it just again, I feel the plight of wrestlers because like it's hard to make something better. Like,
yeah.
Like, and like the easiest thing to do is just let's make it longer, or let's just do the thing people like the most and do more. But I feel like eventually it kind of gets to the point where it's just too much of a good thing, and I almost feel like even though fans might be disappointed, sometimes I would prefer if like when you do a rematch, just try and do something different rather than let's just do more of a great thing, because sometimes too much is just too much,
Yeah, I mean, when you get that much tomato sauce, it's like you're sort of just like, I feel like I've been assassinated. And that's what I think some of these matches
I was wondering where that was going, and I was not disappointed. But like going back to though, like I think kind of what your point was, like these guys, like they did not slack on the effort here. Like they clearly were willing to do so goddamn much. I mean, the fork in the ear and all the props, like they worked really hard. And so I feel bad the way criticized. It's just I feel like, man, you did a lot here, and it's kind of like overwhelming everything else.
I think from now on, when there's a match like this where they just like kind of overwhelm stuff with this, I'm gonna say this is a match that this is like an assassination kind of match. They really. I'm gonna try to remember to do this. It's like when there's a match that's just like Unga Pachka or whatever, as Nick Weiger likes to say on Doughboys, or just where it's just too much of a good thing. I will say that I've been assassinated by the match. Hold me to it, Trevor.
People already call blood juice, so if we're gonna have any legacy on wrestling, maybe we can get assassinated in the vernacular.
Yes.
One day,
just remind me that if anybody just remind me that if anyone famous gets assassinated, to not say it, because I know that'll be like too soon, cancellation, the whole deal.
What if Chef Boyardee got assassinated?
Is he still alive? I feel like he.
I don't even know.
I feel like he almost definitely isn't, if he ever was in the first place.
Anyway, this is going to be an episode I think people are either going to think it's one of our best episodes or one of our worst. I think it's one of our best, but let's
the real Chef Boyardee was like opening restaurants in the 1920s, I'm discovering, so I feel like he's not alive.
I feel like I did not expect when we started recording tonight that something you were going to have to do is quickly Google Chef Boyardee.
Well, the good news is he cannot get assassinated, so because he's already dead.
Now Homicide and Carino, they have had a lot of heat against each other. And as someone who I'm no insider, I have no idea how much it was real or not. It seems to be real. They seem to insist about a lot of it. This is a thing where this was a match where they definitely had some bad blood from it, I would think. So a couple notes. First, from the Observer from right after the show, Dave wrote about this match. I heard reports it was great and reports it wasn't good at all. I guess it depends on what you think.
Both are true.
Yeah, again, that kind of sums up our review. It's kind of valid. You can see it both ways. Dave wrote, I guess it depends on what you think of forks being dug into foreheads.
Ears, Dave, ears.
Yeah, exactly. Dave, once again, just picking the wrong live reports.
Dave and his fake news.
He's always inches off. Lots of problems from early on. Homicide did his tope con hilo and overshot, hurting his shoulder. At one point, Carino stuck the fork in his head too hard. When he told Carino not to attack his shoulder because he's hurt, Carino heard wrong and then started kicking the shoulder hard. Now, by the way, you can see that. I was on the lookout for that. There is a point in this match where it's like in the middle of the match, like quite a few minutes after the injury happens, Carino starts stomping Homicide in the shoulder, and you can see Homicide's face turn real very quickly, and he gets mad. He's like, "Don't fucking like it gets not wrestling talk, but we're working a match. Don't fucking do that, real."
Yeah.
So we'll get to a little bit more of that in a second. Right here. when he told Carino not to attack his shoulder because he's hurt, Carino heard wrong and then started kicking the shoulder hard. When Cabana ran in, he clotheslined Homicide and knocked him silly, and Homicide wanted out because he had gutted through about the match out for about 11 minutes at that point, since the injury by that point. That was not the original finish. Homicide went to the hospital after the match, and he never goes to the hospital. He had a very badly bruised shoulder and will be out for a few weeks. So yeah, that's the other thing. If you watch this match, like, Homicide takes a close line, and I watched it again knowing this. Colt comes back in the mask a second time after taking out Smokes early, creams Homicide with this clothesline. And if you watch this match, after that clothesline, like, Homicide has to lie there for a while because Mike Keener, the ref who got taken out, he has to really sell slowly recovering and making the slow 3 count. And so Homicide's selling being taken out by this clothesline. And you can see as soon as the pin is done, Homicide like instantly like shoves Carino's arm off him and like immediately gets out of the ring like kind of like that, I'm done selling, I'm done wrestling, like fuck this, I'm going, kind of like pissed off. I've had enough of this kind of
and who could blame him?
Yeah, exactly. But and then, so a few weeks later, Dave wrote, had an update about this in the Observer. Right here, Dave wrote, the Homicide Carino deal is a weird one in the sense that often promotions take real-life heat and then try to capitalize on it by having the guys work a program. Homicide and Carino started by working a stiff program, but things have gotten to where they may break them away from each other in Ring of Honor because of the heat from the program. At TNA, Homicide was telling people he was going to get at Carino, believing that Carino deliberately didn't catch him on the dive that messed up his shoulder and was kicking the shoulder. Again, with Carino, who knows? Which I thought was kind of weird for Dave to write. Like, I don't know if he just meant because they've had prior heat because, Carino lost the hearing from in one of his ears from Aaron Homicide slap. But that's kind of a heavy thing to accuse someone of, to be like, maybe he did it all on purpose. But anyway.
Well, he didn't exactly say that, so Dave has plausible deniability here.
No. Yeah, you're right. Anyway, Dave continues, but the Homicide deal is bad. He tried to work the prior weekend on the FIP show, and it became clear he couldn't. He needs shoulder surgery, but doesn't have insurance and can't afford to take the 6 months off after surgery to let it heal.
Fucking America.
Yeah. It's a bad time for him because he's just starting with TNA, and his job in TNA is to do the bulk of the work for the Conan, Apollo, and Homicide threesome. Shocker may also be brought back for it, but it will be hard to make him part of the group if he can't work. Plus, regarding Ring of Honor, he's among the highest paid guys there, and while they can shoot angles with him for a while when he's hurt, they can only do it for so long. When he's a little better, they can do what they do with guys who are working hurt doing the short brawls all over the building, but eventually you have to do the good matches or you start falling behind with the standards so high. So, yeah, like, this was the worst time for Homicide to get hurt because, yeah, like Dave said, he was breaking into TNA at this point with LAX. I don't think Homicide's out for that long, but I think his shoulder's kind of a thing that hampers him for maybe ever after this. And it's one, like you said, like fucking America with the insurance, but also I feel like sometimes wrestlers, like we've seen in modern years, like in the last 20 years, there have been eras where top indie guys can make 6 figures on the indies. And sometimes people are like, well, if you're making good money, why would you sell out for even similar money in a major promotion? And I feel like this is the kind of thing people forget about, which is like, if you're even making good money on the indies and you get hurt, like, it's not like WWE or AEW where you're getting paid even to sit on the shelf and recover. You're screwed. You have to come back.
Yeah, although especially back then, you still weren't getting health insurance from your wrestling companies.
Exactly. So it is just sad. Like, a guy like Homicide, I think he was saying on some shoot interview I saw, like, I wrestling's my full-time gig, and I think it was the one in early 2007, so I don't know if he was at that point yet, but it's one of those things where clearly he was at a point where wrestling was at least a sizable part of his income, and at that point you have 2 options, which is literally like, screw myself financially or just gut through something I probably shouldn't be gutting through. And he definitely seemed to do the latter. But it's intermission now, late match intermission because they're setting up the cage. On late show intermission, that is. Gary Michael Capetta is there. He's backstage with Lacey. Lacey says Lacey's Angels have been doing great. They're on a winning streak. In fact, they're doing so great, she felt that they deserve the night off, which is why they're not on the show. So this entire promo is literally just to be like, hey, don't forget that Lacey's Angels exist. They're just not on the show. And that brings us to the main event. Steel Cage Warfare match, Generation Next of Austin Aries, Jack Evans, Matt Sydal, and Roderick Strong defeated the Embassy of Abyss, Alex Shelley, Jimmy Rave, and Prince Nana in 41 minutes, 36 seconds. The eliminations went as follows, because this, in fact, was an elimination match. Jimmy Rave eliminated Matt Sydal via pinfall in 22 minutes, 22 seconds after he hit the pedigree, a.k.a. Greenies from Ghana, after Abyss had also hit Sydal with a Black Hole Slam. Jack Evans then eliminated Abyss via pinfall in 33 minutes, 20 seconds after he hit the Ode to the Bulldogs off the top of the cage, which crazy spot where Roderick Strong is holding Abyss as he stands on the top rope, and then Jack jumps off the top of the cage onto Abyss, who's sitting on top of Roddy's shoulders, and then does the moonsault. Or he does it to Rave or whoever Strong was holding before he hits Abyss with the moonsault. Alex Shelley eliminated Jack Evans via pinfall in 35 minutes, 50 seconds after he hit an air raid crash off the second rope. Roderick Strong eliminated Jimmy Rave via submission in 40 minutes and 6 seconds when he made him tap out to the stronghold. And at the exact same time, Austin Aries eliminated Alex Shelley via pinfall in 40 minutes and 6 seconds after he hit a DDT and a brainbuster on open steel chair. And then finally, Austin Aries eliminated Prince Nana via pinfall in 41-36 after hitting the 450. The only survivors in the match, Austin Aries and Roderick Strong. So, Matt, before I throw it to you, I will just explain the rules. This was Ring of Honor's, I would say, their take on War Games. You still had the staggered entries with the heels going first because they won the rights to go first by winning that tag match at Vendetta. You still had a cage, and obviously you don't have the two rings, and you don't have the closed top. It's an open top standard steel cage in one ring. Instead of a door, Ring of Honor just like cut out one panel of the cage where a door would be. So that was like, and because of that, wrestlers could kind of freely go in and out of the ring throughout the match. And there was a couple key moments during this match where that happened. It was elimination, as we point out, instead of the regular War Games where it would just be the first person to quit on one team loses the whole match for their team. And eliminations could happen anytime, unlike War Games where the match can only end when everybody gets in the ring. And finally, the last big change, which I think hurt the match we can talk about later, instead of the regular War Games where it's 5 minutes for the first two guys, and then after that a new guy comes in every 2 minutes, this was 5 minutes for the first two guys, and then every 5 minutes another guy comes in. So much longer periods of it before each entry. And that was this match, and that was the end of the feud. So, Matt, what do you think about this as a big blow-off, as a big gimmick match, as a Ring of Honor's kind of their first take on War Games? I think you could say their Cage of Death match later next year would have kind of elements of War Games to it as well. But what do you think about this one?
Well, every promotion, basically, since WCW went out of business, has tried to do their version of War Games, right? Like in America, pretty much every single one. Indies, big companies. I think even TNA did their version, right? Like they had what is TNA's version called? I don't even remember.
I'm not sure. I know they did the pay-per-views Lockdown, which where every match.
Lethal Lockdown, right? That's what it is. Yeah, and then AEW does Blood and Guts. WWE does War Games. Or NXT, I guess. And I think
even MLW has done War Games.
Yeah. I mean, I think IWA Mid-South like did their version. Like I think lots of indies did. Every single one of them, I think, has suffered from the same problem, which is they're too long. They dragged them out. The classic War Games matches were like fast-paced, and they ended very quickly after all five guys were in the ring, like within a few minutes usually, right?
Yeah.
And every other company doesn't do that, and they make it. I think the idea, I guess, is that they just want it to be epic, and sometimes epic is not as good as just short and intense. And they all would have benefited from that. Now, I think here's my thing. I think ROH probably did the best ever non-WCW version of War Games. It just wasn't this match.
Yeah,
I agree. It was Cage of Death, which we'll get to in a while. But this match had a lot of good stuff in it. Like, it had a lot of spectacular stuff. But the problem was, repeatedly, over and over again, a wrestler would enter the match, do a lot of really cool stuff, and then because they had like 4 more minutes to kill, it would slow to a crawl again, and the crowd would get quiet again. And it's not like the work was ever bad, but there were points where it was boring. Like, they definitely worked hard, so I don't want to knock that at all. But like, there was also the thing of, one thing that made War Games cool, obviously I think it would be hard for ROH to have done like the 2 rings and all that stuff. But the idea that they're trapped in a cage with each other is part of the whole deal. And Gabe immediately says right from the beginning, they're not trapped in the cage, so the cage is basically just a weapon or a prop here. And it's like, all right, I guess that's not ideal, but all right, again, I mean, you want to say it that way, I guess that is how they used it, just as a prop. So it starts with Ares and Rave, and they immediately fight outside the cage. That's like the first thing they do. And to me, that doesn't super get over the gimmick, but fine. They want to do it that way, that's fine. Oh, by the way, another side thing before I get too much into the match. Gabe mentions at the beginning, since there's so much history to recap, they don't even bother making a video because they couldn't recap at all. And I was just thinking, they just did a music video recap for this match, at, the Vendetta, 8-man tag. So they clearly already had a video, so you could say that instead of saying that we couldn't make one. That's, I guess, beside the point, though. But, so they do that, and then Shelley comes in next. He has a chair, he's wearing a Generation Next shirt to troll Ares. They beat up Ares methodically for a while. Then Seidel comes in, and he does some cool stuff. He goes for a moonsault, but Shelley gets his knees up, so Seidel flies over. Then he drop toe holds Rave into Shelley's knees. Then he stands on Rave's back and does a moonsault onto Rave's back into Shelley's knees, which I thought was pretty cool. They do this convoluted thing where they wrap Rave's legs around Shelley in a head scissors and then turn them both over into a double bow and arrow, which was wacky and cool. Then the heat dies down again. They're killing more time. No one blades for the first 25 minutes, actually, which is surprising because in War Games, it's just that's instant blading in those original War Games matches, right? Abyss comes in third. I think he looks really good here. I remember live, Abyss was his appearance was one of the hottest parts of the match. He shoves the timekeeper, gets into the ring, does the torture rack drop on Ares right away, and he kicks Seidel away in the process. Chucks Seidel up and shoves him down. And, they beat on the Generation Next for a while. At this point, someone yells, "Shelley, you fucking sellout!" And Shelley responds, "You fucking suck, fatty." And then Prazak just says, matter-of-factly, and Shelley talking some trash to an overweight individual in the crowd.
I love that.
I was just like, okay. Not going to comment, but interesting. They do a thing where Shelley actually does the skull fuck, head bump thing from Ares onto the chair a bunch of times, which looks like it really hurt. That probably really hurt, right? That had to, that's, but, and at that point, Ares finally blades. Then Strong comes in. He goes bonkers with chops and backbreakers, so the crowd wakes up for that. Strong goes for the big fireman's carry double knees on Abyss, but Abyss powers out, and then Strong runs the ropes, and Abyss does this really cool overhead belly-to-belly suplex onto Strong right into the cage, which I thought was probably the best spot of the match up to that point. Now Rave is bleeding. Seidel leapfrogs over Rave right into a black hole slam. And Abyss tries to pin him, but Rave tells him, no, I want to pin him. So he pulls Abyss off, pedigrees, or greetings from Ghana's, Seidel, and pins him. So now it's that 3-on-2. I will say Seidel didn't get to do as much as I would have expected. He had a lot of big flying moves that he really did not get to do. I guess to not outshine Evans, I was surprised he didn't do more for this big blow-off. But the stuff
he's the only guy that gets eliminated before everyone's in the match.
Yeah, it was interesting I don't know why they did that, but I guess it did get Abyss over. So Nana comes out next. I think this was a negative because Nana, at this point, Nana coming out after the embassy's already in control and then they have 5 minutes to kill. That's just that's too much time. No one's blade job is epic, by the way. But I think Rave's is probably the best of the three bleeders, which are Rave, Ares, and Strong. So they beat down Generation X for a while. It's not super interesting, and then they finally get to the climactic part of the match, where it gets good. So Jade Chung appears. Now the whole thing with Jade Chung was she was pedigreed after the Chicago show. On the concrete, and her face was destroyed supposedly, but she comes out, but she just has one bandage on her cheek, and otherwise looks the same. So I mean, what were they really going to do? But still, it's just funny the way how much they oversold it. But still, I thought it was done well because she's just oh, you think a so Pedigree's going to put me down after all the abuse. I'm on my own 2 feet. And like Nana like tells everybody in the embassy to leave the ring and chase her around ringside, which sets up perfectly Jack Evans' entrance where he comes out, gets into the ring. The embassy is already all on the floor, so Evans just looks around. Immediately, first thing he does, goes to the top of the cage and hits a double moonsault onto the embassy, or really just Abyss. But I remember live, like that was just one of the most spectacular things I ever saw. And it's an actual...
He kills Abyss. I'm shocked that Abyss doesn't have a concussion. He hits him right in the head with his legs coming from the double moonsault off the top of the cage.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I mean, what a moment live. Just one of the more memorable live moments I can remember in ROH. And, something that I could actually see because he was up on top of the cage. So that was a really cleverly done spot. A good use of Jade Chung, I would say. So now Evans, Strong, and Aries, they go to attack on the floor. They triple team Abyss in the ring. Roderick gets the double knees on him. And then I agree with you, but if you said this, maybe I misheard you. I think this is even more spectacular than the double moonsault. Rave follows up Jack, but Strong stands on the top rope with him on his shoulders. And Evans jumps off the top of the cage onto Rave's shoulders and does the Ode to the Bulldogs moonsault off of Rave's shoulders above the cage, which is terrifying. Evans could have super died on that move. If he
jumping off a sweaty body.
He slipped on that move before. We've seen it.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because of those two spots, they're both incredible, but the double moonsault's the one that always gets put into the compilations of spots on stuff. Yeah. That to me, the crazier spot, like you just said, is when you think about how dangerous it is, is jumping off another human being at that height while the other guy's holding you, by the way, is standing on the ropes.
Yes. Insane. But he hits it. It looks great, at least from the angle that we saw. And it's the perfect way to eliminate Abyss, I would say, in my opinion. So now it's 3-on-3. Everyone's taking turns attacking Rave. Shelley stops them. Evan goes for the 630 on Shelley. Shelley gets his knees up and then hits the air raid crash off the middle rope and pins Jack, which the crowd is extremely unhappy about. I remember everyone was really pissed about that because it's why are you eliminating the star of the match? It really didn't even seem necessary to eliminate him, honestly. They could have just kept him in there. They could have had all three of those guys survive the match, right? But
you have to think they want Aries and Strong to the final two to kind of set up the tag title run, I guess, to kind of. Sure. But the funny thing is, them winning the tag title should establish them as a great tag team. I don't know if you need them to be the only two survivors, but I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they also just thought, maybe just they wanted to give a little bit more jeopardy to Aries and Strong in the end.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what it was. So Nana's basically just watching while everyone else fights, and the crowd gets quiet again because they're mad about Evans being eliminated. And they do a few near falls. Gonorrhea gets a near fall. Shelley gets a shell shock, but Strong breaks up the pin. And then Raven Shelley, they set up Strong and Aries in the corner for Nana's running butt, and I guess this is a cute spot. Even though it's surprising to have a comedy spot so late in the match, but basically Nana goes for his running butt in the corner, but he misses both guys and hits his own guy because they move out of the way, but he doesn't realize it either time. So he's just gloating and dancing after he just butted his own two guys in the corner. And then, so that's kind of cute, I suppose, but still weird timing for a spot like that. Meanwhile, Strong backbreakers Rave 5 times in a variety of different ways, then gets the stronghold. Simultaneously, Aries DDT Shelley on a chair and brainbusters him on a chair. So Aries pins Shelley while Rave is tapping out to the stronghold, which is cool. And that leaves Strong and Aries alone with Nana. And Nana, of course, tries to run away. He ping-pongs back and forth. Eventually, they get the half Nelson backbreaker. Aries follows up with the 450, gets the win. So, that's a match with a lot of really great spots. But, it dragged a lot and a lot of times. And just, the intervals were a killer. There are other things that I think could have been different. I think they maybe could have made it more inside the cage and not just use the cage as a prop and not, relied so much on the in and out stuff. But if they were going to do that, at least make it shorter. But you can't fault the effort. And the big spots were really great. So I still thought the match was good, but I think a little bit disappointing. I think if you really like as far as like super fun like spectacle matches, I think their match in Buffalo was actually the most exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like this one had its moments definitely. Like it's certain like certainly good, and I just man, if it was just half as long, it would have been much better.
So something I did, because you really got me thinking when you brought up like the lengths of War Games matches. So when I was a kid, like in Canada, at least where I lived in Western Canada in BC, my video stores, big WWF, like you could get every WWF Coliseum home video pretty much at a lot of the video stores. And there was very few WCW videos ever for years until I got TBS for a while. Like WCW, anything was the holy grail for me.
That was honestly pretty common in video stores across, I think, across America too. Like WWF had a way bigger presence in a lot of these major video stores. I guess they were just better at distributing.
So in like the mid to late 90s, my favorite video store, they had tons of WWF, and they had like two or three they would eventually get like a few random like late 90s WCW pay-per-views on VHS. But the one WCW show they had was actually technically NWA, was a compilation tape of the first two War Games matches that were done on like the house show circuit, I think, during
it was the Bash '87 comp tape. Yeah, my store had that one too.
And I just looked up out of curiosity. So, Matt, you were talking about how long this match is. This match, I think I said was like 41 minutes or something. That entire tape, which has two War Games matches on it, was 50 minutes. So, like, that shows you the difference of, like, the original, like, the classics that inspired all the imitators. You could fit basically almost two of them in the length of this match.
Yep.
So this match, I would say, like, it hits a lot of the beats that you need to hit, but yet all your criticisms are true and bring it down. Like, if you look at it, it does a lot of the little things right. Like, or not the little things, the big things, I would say. Like, the heels have the advantage, which you need in a War Games match. You can't get cute. Like, a War Games match, I always say, is a hot tag delivery system, because what makes a War Games match great, one of the things is it takes something that people really like in tag matches, which is the hot tag, where the heels have beaten down the faces. All of a sudden, the fresh face comes in and runs wild. A lot of tag matches, you get one, maybe two of those sequences. A War Games match gives you that 4 or 5 times, or 3 or 4 times, and that's what makes them really great. And as long as you do have the heels get the advantage, this match does that. I think it starts out well where it's Ray and Aries, and Aries just destroys Ray for pretty much the first entire 5 minutes to really stress like how screwed the embassy will be when they don't have the numbers advantage. And so that's kind of fun and satisfying. Jade Chung returns, like you mentioned, and she, yes, it's ridiculous that for someone that we were told had her face destroyed to the point where she's leaving all of wrestling to see her come back with a small bandage on is ridiculous. And it is a note for note redo of the Lucifer thing during the Second City Saints Prophecy feud, where she comes back after being beaten out of wrestling forever but it still was like a satisfying full circle moment. It like you mentioned,
cleverly done to set up that spot.
Yeah, that was great too, like you were saying. And the one thing I thought was weird about it, though, she does a little mic work when she comes up to distract them. And one thing she says, it felt so like stiff. She said something to the effect of like, Nana, you're known as the man of 1,000 expressions, but I bet I've never seen that one before on your face. And it's like, is Prince Nana known as the man of 1,000 expressions? Like, I don't know if I've ever heard that before. That sounds like such a weird thing. Like, Prince Nana, you're the man of 1,000 expressions.
Chris Jericho's the man of 1,001 expressions. Expression number 1, smile.
So that I really enjoyed. I thought it ended the way it should, where Nana, the guy who at this point is mostly a manager, is like left alone to get his just desserts. I think that's the right ending for this kind of match. I even liked how Aries and Strong, they each took out their like longtime rival simultaneously with their signature move. So like, Strong gets to take out Ray, who I guess isn't a longtime rival, but he had attacked Jade Chung, and then Aries takes out Shelly, at the same time to bring that kind of full circle. I liked all those big story beats. I thought they hit just the way they needed to hit, but like you said, it's just too long, and that affects it a couple of ways. Like you said, I think a lot of this match, like, there's a reason why those War Game matches had the 2-minute intervals once you had, like, numbers advantage. It's because you don't need longer than 2 minutes, and it's really hard to sustain I think a 5-minute beatdown, make it entertaining. And in this match, like you were saying, there's a lot of parts of this match where it's just the heels kind of stomping and choking and not doing anything really exciting to the faces. And kind of, it almost feels like you can feel them just waiting for the next guy to come in and the next big planned spot. I feel like a lot of times in wrestling, we complain in modern wrestling about sometimes there's two matches are too planned out. This was a match that I feel like it needed to be a bit more planned out, because there are times in this match where the heels are just like, it feels like they don't know what to do. Like they got more time than they know what to do with. And it's just like, what are we going to do till Jack comes in? What are we going to do till, so-and-so comes in? And the other way it hurt, I think, was the elimination thing, because I don't think eliminations in this kind of match are a bad thing, but I would have made it until the elimination, so that the eliminations only could start when everyone was in the match, because there are moments in this match where everyone's just standing around and there's no urgency, like especially when the announcers would be like, 1 minute or whatever, 60 seconds till the next entrant, and the heels would have the advantage. And since eliminations can happen at any time, you would think the heels, since they were in such dominant positions, would like be in a real rush, like we got to try and eliminate someone before they even the odds. And instead, so often it's like that announcement would happen, and they would just lackadaisically do a couple stomps and a choke, and it's like it gave them a reason to be urgent. The eliminations gave them a reason to be urgent in a match where they frequently were not urgent, which I think kind of like emphasized how weird parts of this and how long this match could be.
They corrected that for Cage of Death, where they made it one fall to a finish, and I think that was the right move.
Yeah, definitely. The Jack Evans spot's absolutely amazing, and it's funny, like it's a match where he's not in for very long, but he makes a huge impact. I think he's the biggest star. Other than that, Abyss, you mentioned, I agree. Like his section is really fun, where he kind of gets to run wild but even that, it's only a couple minutes, and then it kind of slows back down again, to your point. I thought the other thing I could have used more of, and I thought the only guy that really did it was Alex Shelley, was I think a fun of the War Games too is when the heels have the advantage that they're just delighting it and they're just real dicks about rubbing it in. And I thought Alex Shelley was, from a character standpoint, the star of this match, where he was delighting in rubbing it in and just like taunting the fans, like you point out, wearing the Generation Next t-shirt. Like I thought he did a great job of that. I wish there was more of that, and everyone else got more into that.
Even when he did that skull bouncing spot, he was like, "Yeah, Aries, watch it back later on the tape."
Yeah, that's such a great line, and he's like, he was loving it, and everyone else was just kind of playing their roles, but it seemed like he was having a blast, just like. And again, that if you're not going to have a big action for the whole 5 minutes at a time when the heels are in control, that's a way you could still entertain. It's just be kind of like a funny asshole, like really gloat. But yeah, overall, this is a match that did the big things right. It's just too long, and they didn't have enough stuff to fill it. And I think I agree with you after listening to you talk. Like, I just don't think a War Games match should necessarily be that long. It should be 2-minute entries, and then maybe you have like a few minutes at the end. Because really, the best part of War Games is always the staggered entries. It's not what comes after.
Yeah, I mean, I think even AEW with the first Blood and Guts match, they had the same problem. It was just too long and too drawn out.
And kind of going back to the Carino, homicide thing, this was a match, it was a little bit of it got assassinated a little bit. It was a little too much.
Assassinated us again.
They thought they were making it better by making it longer, giving you longer periods, and it not necessarily, what, even though you would think in some ways, hey, like we're giving you more in some way, we're giving you eliminations, we're giving you more of this match. It's not always what you actually want.
A bunch of assassins booking this show.
Gabe Sapolsky cannot leave for the world of NFTs for a variety of reasons, but that's now the number one is he needs to come back just so his new nickname can be like the Assassinate or something like that.
We love you, Gabe.
Also, I forgot one other great spot I loved. I forgot if you mentioned it, but when Abyss had Abyss had Aries in the torture rack, and he gives Matt Sydal a big boot while he's holding Abyss in the torture rack. Aries in the torture rack. I thought that was really cool. Anyway, so I would say, like, if I had to give this a star rating, I would give it like 3 3/4, 3.5, somewhere in there. So it's not that it's not a good match, and I think you said also it's a very good match, but it's not as good as I remembered it. I think I when I was younger, maybe I was less analytical about wrestling, maybe in some ways. You know what? I bet you when I first watched the show all those years ago, I probably did not like the Romero Danielson match nearly as much, and I probably like this match quite a bit more. And it's just the way, life changes you, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think live this was my favorite match because I could see a lot of it. Like I'm serious. Like I know it's going back to that well, but like this was definitely a good match live. But I even remember live. I remember it got quiet and it was like this is kind of dragging a little bit. But like those big spots at the end were so exciting, And
Yeah.
Abyss's entrance was really exciting. So there was enough really cool stuff throughout to keep it going. But
Yeah.
I just wish it was shorter.
So after the match, All of Generation Next and Jade Chung celebrate in the ring, and Jade at one point, like Rave is down the ring selling. She uses him as a footstool to kind of like pose on the ropes, which again is another one of those great kind of where it's. I love those moments where things go full circle. I love like that in a way that was the start of all of this, and that's how it ends. Like I think that's a really nice little moment.
That was a great moment for sure. Like really great.
And then Aries screams at the camera that it's all over for the Embassy, and Generation Next is now coming for the tag title, so already setting that up for the next show. And then we cut to Samoa Joe backstage. Joe says the ones you're closest with hurt you the most. He wants to know why Jay Lethal did this to him after everything they've been through together. He tries to look choked up as he's just like, why, Jay? Why? And then he just walks away. Forlorn Samoa Joe. We very rarely get the forlorn Samoa Joe.
Basic and to the point final promo.
Yeah. And that is Steel Cage Warfare. Matt,
just like the most recent Dynamite, it ends with Samoa Joe and Jay Lethal.
This was certainly a noteworthy show. Like you could tell. It's funny. Like not everything went as good as it could have been, but definitely, it's another show where Gabe is clearly seeing New York as one of his biggest markets. Where Jay Lethal heel turn, Lance Storm surprise appearance, big feud ending massive gimmick match, a rematch to like one of the classic Ring of Honor matches of all time. Like they really did throw a lot on this show.
Yeah, I've used this word a lot on this review, but it was a spectacle. Like, this is just like an impressively spectacular show for ROH. Like, it was not their best wrestling show by a long shot, although that title match really is a great match. But it felt like a big deal. And like, it's super entertaining, I would say, the whole way through. There was nothing bad at all on it. And so this is, I'd say, this is, again, we're a far cry from some of the boring shows from the middle of the year. Like, this is like a really entertaining DVD. And I mean, if you're into ROH in this era, it's worth watching. It's memorable. It was a memorable show, even though the wrestling was not the peak of ROH.
Yeah, I think you put it. That's a great way to put it. I was kind of struggling for my thoughts, and you kind of framed it for me right there. Because I would say like it's disappointing in the sense of if you look at this card on paper. A lot of the matches, for various reasons we've gone through, don't quite live up to the hype. Because on paper, this card looks great, but there's nothing that's bad, like you said. And I think everything feels notable. Like the way you put really is the best. It's a spectacle, and I feel like on this show, like the spectacle kind of makes up for some of the matches not quite hitting the way they potentially could.
Exactly.
And so it's a really unique show, I think, in that sense, because I feel like Ring of Honor kind of usually lives or dies just on are the matches good. You don't get a lot of show like compared to WWE, where like there are a lot of WWE shows in my lifetime where like one big angle or one big spectacle like saves kind of middling wrestling.
This year's WrestleMania, I would say, it's like wasn't the world's greatest wrestling show, but it was like quite a spectacle.
I mean, the first night of WrestleMania, I wouldn't call that as like a nuts and bolts great show, although there was some really good wrestling on it, but it was like, as just a night of entertainment, it was great. And this is kind of the closest I feel like we've seen Ring of Honor get to that kind of same vibe.
I agree. I would say the last time it got like, it would be like that, where it was like an ROH show where the spectacle really carried it even more than the wrestling, was the first Death Before Dishonor.
Yeah, too. Because even like that stuff, like even the Jeff Hardy thing, where it wasn't good, but it was at least like fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like the Paul London match. That's a great grab there, because like the Paul London Samoa Joe match was like this show. It was not as good as you'd hope it would be, but because it was like a special importance, you were like, this is still worth watching. But
exactly.
So that is the show. If you want to send us an email like Eric did, I mean, great email. Like that shows you how much emails can add to a show. You know, if you have little stories, they can be so fun. Or even just have thoughts you want to give. We love to read them. We don't guarantee we'll always use them on the show, but we often do. So that would be throughtheyears@gmail.com. Thank God, Matt, you caught that because I did not check the email today. Our Twitters, if you want to see what dumb things I'm getting, I'm trying to be better behaved, but I'm sure I will screw that up eventually. At Trevor Dame, at Mayor MGF. Matt posts tweets way less than me, but his tweets are much higher batting average. I'm a guy who swings all the time, and I get a bunch of home runs, but I actually like strike out 8 out of 10 times.
My tweets are not as good as yours. Don't even try it, but they are much more wholesome.
You will not see a lot of drama from a Matt Feuerstein tweet.
I am not courting controversy. I like everyone.
Yeah, you don't care if it creates cash. You're being safe. We have a thread on the ProWrestlingOnly.com plugs forum, all our feeds, blah blah blah. And next time on the show, if this was big, we are going from strength to strength for the next few shows actually. Because the next show is Final Battle 2005, which would be a big show on its own because it's got a big tag title match. It's got the next big chapter of the Ring of Honor Noah relationship really growing with Kenta coming in with racing Low Ki, Naomichi Marufuji coming in to face Bryan Danielson, all of that big stuff. But on top of that, it's the last show of 2005, which means it's going to be our annual year-end show where, for those who have not heard before, our Final Battle show is always we do a regular show, we do all Final Battle, and then usually we do like another 30 to 60 minutes where we do a handful of awards for the year. We kind of sum up our thoughts of the whole year. We kind of go through the Observer Awards, talk a couple of things, and like that's going to be – and I am dreading it, Matt, because I'm going to basically go through all my notes because I have forgotten so much of what's happened this year. This is the longest year we've covered. I don't remember half the stuff. So trying to figure out what were my favorite matches, who was the best wrestler – I'm dreading that.
I will say this. I think I got my matches of the year down. I will say that. My top 3, I think I got them.
Yeah. Nigel and Colt, for sure.
Yeah, that's going to be your number 1 over Joe versus Kobashi. It's going to break the internet.
The only way, people, that you're going to find out is if you listen to the next Through the Years. So, until then, until next time, have a good time. Have a great time.